Morning, everybody. Welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee of Stratford District Council on Wednesday, the 8th of April 2026. My name's Andy Crump. I will be chairing today's meeting. We've got a packed agenda, so hopefully today we will have brevity and no repeats, please. We have to do the usual notifications at the start of each meeting. Fire evacuations, there are no planned fire alarms scheduled at this time. Therefore, should the fire alarm go off, please make your way out of the building via the nearest exit to the car park beside the Windmill Public House. And again, the usual standard ones regarding microphones. Make sure you're logged in and it's switched on, and please don't move the microphone from its set position. And when speaking, ensure the microphone is direct in front of you and not to the side or up high. I can't promise I won't do that, but we'll do our best. So if you can't hear me, it might be a bonus. But if you can't hear me properly, just throw something at me, preferably chocolate, and say I can't hear you properly, catch the crump, and we'll sort something out. So first item on the agenda is apologies. Howard, please.
Yes, good morning, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Alcott this morning, for whom Councillor Ballinger is substituting. Apologies from Councillor Rolfe, for whom Councillor Jenny Fragedy is substituting, and we also have apologies from Councillor Hedges-Serafin.
Thank you. Welcome to the substitutes again today. Councillor Jenny Fragedy, seem to be here more often than some regular members of the committee, but you're always welcome. And thank you. But it does have a bit of confusion. I have to say Councillor Jenny Fragedy and Councillor Ian Fragedy. So if not, I'll just say Councillor Fragedy and one of you can both answer. So thank you. Disclosures of interest, item 2. Members, have we got any disclosures of interest regarding to today's meeting, please? No, thank you for that. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting on pages 1 to 8. Again, hopefully members have read all those from the meeting on the 4th of March. Could I have an indication that they're a true and accurate record? Councillor Rice, thank you. Councillor Johnston, yeah, brilliant, thank you. No, are you all happy, rest of you? Yeah, good. Chair's brief? No, nothing today, so we'll move on past item 4. Item 5, public participation. To receive questions from the public, notice having been given in accordance with the committee procedure rule 13. I don't believe there's any, is there?
Yes, Chair, we have a question from Mr. Whelan, who's here today.
Thank you, Mr. Whelan.
Members, you should have a copy of the question in front of you in your tables.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. Right then, Mr. Whelan, would you like to come forward, please? I believe I'm just making sure you'd been signed in okay and you're able to come and speak.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to ask this question.
Could you just bring your microphone a little bit closer to you?
Is that okay?
Just a little bit more. That's brilliant.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you again for giving me this opportunity to put this question. It's relating to freehold residential privately managed open spaces, which I know you're all aware of. And I'm just here to ask a general question. I'm Peter Whelan. I'm from Sandringham Avenue, which is on the Hathaway Gardens Phase 2 estate in Stratford. A developer was West Midlands, Bellway West Midlands, and the property managing agent is Firstport. My question is, following the results of your recent survey and statements from...
You just moved away again.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Regarding freehold management open spaces, following the results of your recent survey and statements from freehold owners highlighting the failures of current management system, what is the committee and SDC's view of proposals for councils to return to the pre-2005 position for councils to adopt public open spaces on new build estates going forward and retrospectively. Just a little addition to that, I recently was kindly provided with a copy of the Section 106 documents for this estate at the time of the planning original application. And I notice on it off-site public open space contribution. This is a sum of money that would have been handed over to the district council at the time for off-site open space, amount of £42,912. Well, our development is 65 homes, so I'm sort of reckoning that if this has been in place since 2005, and this pro rata was applied to all new developments since then, a large amount of money must have been passed over to the district council for open spaces, from which I can see from the clause here, the actual new developments receive no benefit. Thank you.
Brilliant. I think there's a couple of things up. Thanks, Mr. Whelan. Thank you very much. There's a couple of things on that. You may have noticed later on the agenda, we've had a task and finish group chaired by Councillor Johnston regarding public actions, public open spaces, flood alleviation schemes and estate roads. So there's a final report that's going to be considered. But certainly some of the points you raise are in that final report. Your subsequent addition to your question, which was perfectly reasonable, no problems with that whatsoever. I think it'd probably be better if we get obviously we've got your details and we can give you a full answer to how much we've had for public off-site, public open space contributions and where that money has been spent or how that's been allocated. So I think that would probably be fair. It's not fair on officers. I don't think I've got that information with them to hand. So we will give you that commitment that it will be part, you'll get a reply, and I think we'll also show it as part of the minutes, our answers as well, because I don't think that'll be unreasonable.
That's perfectly reasonable. It was just a matter that I wasn't aware of, and I just thought that it would be worth highlighting.
Bring Mr. Perkson.
Thank you, Chair. I think what we could say this morning, which would help with the principles, just for the committee and for Mr. Whelan's benefit, is the off-site contributions for public open space are collected in Section 106 agreements where the whole of the public open space requirement cannot be met on the development site. So it wouldn't necessarily follow that all sites paid an off-site public open space contribution, because if you could meet the areas and the play area requirements within the development, which is what we would always seek to do in the first instance, that wouldn't trigger an off-site contribution. But as Councillor Crump says, we can provide you a detailed response of sort of the contributions that we've collected. And what we tend to do with those is we use those to invest in other public open spaces, for example, to put sort of paths and play areas and things there to improve the quality of the open space that would be reasonably used by people from that development. It is the general principle that we followed there. So that's a sort of a high-level answer rather than send you away with nothing, and we'll follow up with some more detail in writing.
It's just a little point that it was just sort of to enforce my argument and the case for the District Council to adopt our open space is to bring that into council ownership rather than continue with the very unsatisfactory situation that we have now of poor maintenance, high charges, etc., which you're all aware of.
Yep. No,
Thank you.
I was just checking I was still awake, wasn't it, Councillor Ballinger? So, well done, good man, thank you. Yeah, I think that's all your points have been fair and reasonable, Mr. Whelan. We'll give you a full response back. Later on, we're talking about public open spaces anyway, and there's a report on that. I know the government has had some consultation around these areas as well. But on that task and finish group, the members and people, guest speakers who've had to give us information do share your frustration, and I'm trying to be as diplomatic as that. Councillor Johnston, do you want to come in and add some context, please?
Well, we obviously will be discussing this later. I'm not aware of any specific proposal in current legislation to transfer responsibility of public open space from private management companies to councils. Not only there are examples in this district where I think it's mostly town councils have come to agreements with developers to take on this responsibility. So whether this committee or the council have taken a view on this, I don't think it has. So we're down, I think, to sort of personal views on this. Whilst it would probably be, generally speaking, there are a lot of concerns about the performance of private management companies, and the government needs to do something about it as pretty promptly, in my view. Interestingly, this was there was a councillor from Gloucestershire on Midlands Today on Monday evening, drawing the same point, which members may have seen.
Just one more question then, Mr.
Just,
Whelan.
the reason I've gone down this route of council adopting the public open spaces is Manuela Pertigala, our MP, forwarded me a transcript of a debate in Parliament last April, and she forwarded me the Hansard transcript, and there was a specific question on this from one of the MPs to the Housing Minister regarding the future adoption of public open spaces by council, and his specific question to the Housing Minister at the time was, will this be enacted retrospectively? And the answer was yes. So that's why I'm drifting down that route.
No, that's fine. And again, I think perhaps you might be able to follow up with the MP, and then if you do get a response back, if you could send it to me as chair of Scrutiny Committee for information, that would be helpful as well. So we've all got the same information. But yeah, if you do get any further information or clarification about that, or even a timescale, because I think that's the other pertinent point. They might have the intention to do it, but 5 years later it's not been done. It seems to get swept under the carpet a little bit. So, but I think that's very helpful, and thank you for your participation. It's unusual to have a guest visitor, so thank you very much appreciated. Thank you. Right then, moving swiftly on and talking about guest visitors, we've got the Police and Crime Commissioner, and I could say we've got the police force out in force today with, sorry, they don't get any better. I don't know whether Philip's warned you, gentlemen, about the crump puns, but we've got, we've got Superintendent Malone, is that right? And Sergeants Thompson and Ebbs. Brilliant, thank you very much. And before we start, it wasn't me, I promise. Right then, Mr. Second, would you like to kick off with a bit of introduction, and then we've got some of the questions that we've sent to you as well. Thank you.
Indeed, yes, I've got those questions. Just in general, I'm really here to answer questions and to listen to what you and your residents have to say about crime and policing. There's a lot going on at the moment, and on the strategic level. I'm sure you're aware that we've got local government reorganisation coming, we've got police reform, we've got a review into the number of police forces, and we've also got devolution. So many of those issues are not settled. We have no idea. I've also been abolished in 2 years' time, and we don't really know what's going to replace police governance. So there's a lot floating around at the strategic level that I'm being involved with, and I'll try and answer any questions anybody had. On top of that, I'm also about to start to select a new chief constable. The present chief constable has joined the private sector and has finished with us. Wrong, this is his last week in office, and so that will create quite a bit of work. Just on that, there is a question I know. I will be selecting from a national pool of potential chief constables, and whoever is the best and we think is the is likely to be of great benefit to Warwickshire will be selected. So there's no preconceived ideas on that. These are not my bodyguard. Superintendent Malone is from our OCC, and there are a number of questions about 101 and 999 responses. And the two sergeants, Thompson and Ebbs, are Safer Neighbourhood Team Sergeants in Stratford District. So if you've got particular questions on Stratford District, which you may well have, they may have more up-to-date and more professional answers than I would. So I'm happy to leave it there and listen to the committee, Chair.
Like I say, do you want to, obviously we've got quite a few questions that we've gone through. Would you like to answer some of those? And I assume, will there be some form of written response to these questions as well?
Yes, I mean, do you want to? I mean, there are plenty of questions here. There's 40-something questions. Do you want to go through them all, or pick out topics that the committee would like to?
Councillor Keithy, do you want to come in on this one for a minute, please?
Yeah, well, if it's okay, some of these questions towards the end of the paper. Morning, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. Some of these questions at the end were mine. And I think, just turning the clock back a little bit, when Philip, you came last time, we talked about the performance of what you call the sort of shop front, the responsiveness to calls coming in. And do you remember at the time there'd been quite a lot of abandoned calls, and we heard about the improvements that were coming because you were triaging calls and how you were managing it, and you were going to have some more performance metrics. And I mean, I suppose that brings us back to why we saw you. Was it about a year ago now? It's about a year ago since you came, and I just wondered if you could just let us know how that's going. And I think, as I said in my question, that in my ward particularly, that I think the noise has died down a bit, which kind of makes me feel that the response has probably improved somewhat. But I'd be very keen to hear how you're tackling kind of the shop front stuff, the responsiveness.
Okay, so we had an HMIC FRS report nearly 12 months ago now that outlined that we need to improve our response times and call times, etc., in the OCC. So I'm going to ask Superintendent Malone to explain how things are going and how they've improved.
Okay, thank you. If it's okay with you, Councillor, what I'll do is I'll start at the start and end at the end, which is from when the call lands to when the police arrive at the door. If that makes sense. I cover our force control room and our response teams as well. Part of the improvement was to amalgamate those two departments and to work them as a system. Previously, you'd have one force control room and then 3 independently managed patrol teams working on 3 areas. So that's why I've got both, just to give you the context. So in relation to 999 calls, we changed the way we use staff within the OCC, within the control room. The automation of a function that used to be done by humans has now allowed us to train significantly more staff to deal with 999 calls. The knock-on short story effect of that is we get to about 97% of all 999 calls within the 10-second threshold. It's a marked improvement. The average time is 3 seconds, of which British Telecom actually own 2. The gap, there is nothing we can do about that. It's a national thing. Some forces who use a different call system, you'll see in the national data, will record 0000. That's simply the way BT patched the call. So there is a bit of smoke and mirrors in the data. But of the forces who use Cortex, which we do, we are aligned to the top forces in the actual true mean answer time, which is under 3 seconds, actually about 0.8 seconds, give or take. We take about 399 calls a day, so that gives you an idea of the context going through there. 101, so what you probably heard last time was we'd introduced a Thrive desk, which is basically a function which answers your call through the 101 system. They listen to what the caller is calling about, what the concerns are, what the risk, the threat, the harm is within the incident. They prioritise that call, or they advise the caller that the police is the wrong agency, or it's simply not a police matter. There's about 450 of those calls a day. We lose about 160 calls within 10 seconds. We still don't fully understand why. There is a theory around 111 and 101.
People, as soon as it says, you will be connected to Warwick, they go, oh, actually, no, I wanted the NHS. We haven't got hard data to prove that. It's feedback from people we know have dropped. Being brutally honest with you, I don't know why 160 people hang up after 10 seconds. We simply don't know. However, once they get to triage, which is the safety net, and the average answer time on triage is 52 seconds, they then enter what is a stacked process. I will sit here now and tell you we are still not good enough on 101. Okay? So the average time has come down from around 22 to 19 minutes to the final call answer. Depending on what time of the day you call us, that time can vary wildly. After 2 in the day and before 11 at night, it's very busy. You will wait for longer. We still struggle to push people into a new system called Callback Assist, which you may have experienced with your GP. Again, all the messaging on the 101 system pushes people to use that system when it's busy. Only 8% of callers take the Callback Assist offer. They choose to wait. Of those people who choose to wait, we are then losing around 2 seconds. 16, yeah, and further 16 to 25% of callers before they get connected. That's not good enough. Frankly, it's not good enough. 18 minutes is not good enough. It must come below 10, which is the give or take the national average. The National Police Chiefs Council ambition is 5. Only Humberside are there. They've got a very heavily automated AI-assisted system. You may have read about West Midlands and Bedfordshire Police recently introducing those systems. There are 2 sides to that. You will be dealt with very quickly, but you will deal with a bot, not a human. So AI will screen the risk and the vulnerability within your call. We're working with the MPCC to introduce a retrospective screening system to identify risk that we've missed in those 101 calls and make sure we get back to the caller. But as a force, we're not there yet in going to a forward-facing robotic system that deals with members of the public who, if I'm going to be honest, if they've phoned us, it's probably one of the worst days of their life. There's a strong evidence base around the speed and the efficiency of AI versus the service you'll get from a human. And the insight and the question set that a human being can ask you. So at the minute, I'm very content that triage is capturing risk predominantly in less than a minute. What I'm not happy with is that people who, and when we review the people who are hanging up, it is, and I'm loath to use the word lower level, it will be lower risk crime, if that makes sense. Things that, they're a crime, it's a victim, it's annoying. But if it's lower level, they tend to hang up quicker, if that makes sense. It's logical human behaviour. However, what is good, and what's more promising, is we have seen an increase in people who get to triage and agree to use the single online home system, which is an automated crime reporting system. There's only 8 crime types allowed. They're very low risk, volume crime, what we'd call high level volume crime. You can report your crime online. A crime report and a crime number are automatically generated for you. And that's allocated to an officer to investigate or to a sergeant to make a decision whether or not it goes any further. So the single online home service will increase the hang-up on 101. It will just naturally do that. What I'm not seeing in the data, so I'm not here to tell you it's a great success yet, I'm not seeing a correlation in the hang-up data versus the amount of people who choose single online home. It still is only counting for about another half, give or take, of those hang-ups. That needs to be up near the 90-95% if you're reporting a crime. And the final piece to touch on is ASB. People who are using 101 to report ASB, they can't use single online home. They can use the neighbourhood reporting portals, but again, within Warwickshire, we have got quite a slow pickup on that, and we're doing everything we can to message people into those alternative reporting avenues. But the bottom line is people want to speak to us on the phone. So that's where we're at with 101. So 999 is a success story. 101, we've made great progress, and I'm really proud of the people in the room who are doing it. We do it with limited staff, if I'm being honest. The PCC is very kindly uplifted, provided extra money to put more staff into the OCC. Unfortunately, at the minute, and I'm not going into great detail, the age and the level of service of a lot of people in the control room and the nature of control room work, we're also suffering with, at the minute, some acute sickness issues. We are using people within the OCC to cover that, but then that has a knock-on effect into other, what I would deem less important services. So, where was I? Sorry. Yeah, and the final bit is the recruitment position. So again, with the support of the PCC, thankfully, we've had permission to what's called over-recruit. So for the first time ever, we now have more recruits in waiting than we have vacancies. It's a system we've copied from other forces. We run mass recruitment centres. Through the assessment process, we take about 40% of candidates, so only 40% hit the mark. As of last month, we're now 8 people oversubscribed. So as soon as a vacancy becomes present with the 28-day notice period that most people have, we can quickly employ. People who aren't in work, we can bring in very quickly. We are already seeing the effect that's having on blips in 101 when we get leavers. So the final bit is that staffing resilience piece that is starting to work. It's been a very long journey, as you can imagine, working with unions, staff representations to have that pool of people, if you like. So that's in the room. I'll stop there and ask if anyone's got
okay. Well, thank you for that. I mean, it's clearly a very complex and detailed area, and you've sort of, there's been an awful lot of information you've just imparted onto us. I think just playing back to you then, so 999 calls as a success story. Yep. I'm assuming that if people feel it's that important when they ring 101, they might be directed to 999 if it's an emergency anyway. So
we can track through that, give or take 1 to 3 minute triage, how many calls get pushed straight into an emergency.
Yeah.
It's, in all fairness, it's not that many. The threshold for ringing 999 in the UK is quite low.
yeah, it's interesting that people ring and change their minds very quickly. So that suggests that they're not hanging on for a minute or two. They're leaving quickly.
Like I say, 16%, less than 10 seconds.
Yeah.
So around 160 calls.
So do you think going forward, how in terms of addressing the performance and improving it again, moving another step forward, how important do you think some of this AI and this technology is going to be to help you deliver closer to the targets that you want to get to?
And again, I don't want to go into the sort of mass data, but we see a 5% year-on-year increase in calls for service, and that's quite linear. We see
That, by the way, is going to get probably faster as well as the population increases with all these extra houses we're having.
Yes, so we see increased calls for service. We see increased calls in relation to complex, ambiguous, and often very interdependent partnership issues where people have lost patience with perhaps a service they're not getting, so they resort to the police. Because of the rightful change in focus towards vulnerability in policing, away from what I'd call traditional crime, a lot of the problems presented by callers now, and they're serious problems, they will now start to draw the police more into involvement on the vulnerability side of their needs, not on the crime side. So 11% of calls to the police generate a crime. So the police have 3 core doctrines under our Peeling principles. Of all the calls that come into Warwickshire, 11% of them concern crime and disorder. 46% concern welfare, well-being and public health. And that is something we have to manage through 101 as a rule. AI, I genuinely think, can be the thing to reverse a trend that we are seeing around non-emergency service, basically reductions, and that's stalling. We are getting better, but the improvements are marginal. You're looking at minute or 2 improvements year to year. I want to see that at 5, 10, 15, get the force down to that 5-minute SLA.
Okay.
AI screening, yes. The forces that are using it are showing great promise.
Are all the forces working collectively to look at these opportunities, or are you sort of working a bit independently?
It's getting much better. So there's an NPC, the National Police Chiefs Council lead coordinator, a guy called David, who we're working very closely with. He's assisting us to help that AI tool I alluded to earlier be delivered in the next 3 months. So the coordination between forces is getting significantly better, but it's not as good as it could be. Budgets, computer systems, we're all on different systems, so different companies can work much more effectively with different CAD, what we call control allocation dispatch systems, crime recording systems, due to the 43 force model, which I'm not going to get into the PCC's thing about police reform, but there are differing levels of service depending what postcode you live in.
Okay. Chair, I think I probably had...
Yeah, I'll bring somebody else.
Thank you very much for the explanations and the update on where you are. I understand how difficult it must be.
Can I just say one thing about AI? It is not a substitute for a human response. So where we're using it mostly is in things like, is in transactional, like vetting, firearms licensing, where it can gather information from all sorts of areas and collect it so that a human can then make a decision. But the superintendent was right. If you just go for timing, you can make the service worse for the customer. So it isn't all about timing. It's also about standards and of response and professionalism in that response. So there's a balance there which we are trying to achieve.
Yeah. I will bring you back, Councillor Keith. I know you spend a lot of time in your effort for the questions. We do appreciate that, but I thought I will bring somebody else in as well. Yeah, just a couple of things on that. I suppose I've got Councillor Littlewood and Councillor Wally Huggins in a minute, but I'm going to jump in with Chair's prerogative. A couple of things about that. I think the message coming through is getting it right first time. You can do these things quickly. Oh, yes, I've ticked a box, but then it generates a lot of extra work at a later time. So get it right first time. And secondly, you mentioned HMIC FRS. Are they scrutinising your efforts to improve, looking at AI, what you're doing in terms of systems, budgets, cross partnership working, and again, the change in emphasis towards more vulnerability. So it'd be interesting to see what their views are and what's their initial feedback as part of their inspection. I can't think of the word, so thank you.
Well, we're now obviously addressing any concerns or improvements that were asked for in the last HMIC report, which I say was about 12 months ago. They are coming to re-inspect, to look at the areas they were concerned about, and we should get, hopefully, a resolution of their responses to that. We're also awaiting a child safety inspection from HMIC, which is coming up. We don't know when. They tend to land without much notice. So we think that'll happen this summer. So HMIC is an inspectorate, and plainly the force needs to take notice of whatever they have to say on any topic that they inspect.
Well, yes, I still wear the scars of when I was fire service portfolio holder, when some initial inspections, but yeah, if you show them information and show that you're working with them and trying to do the best for your communities and seeking continuous improvement, they suddenly become more amenable. So I think it's about talking with them. Talking about amenable, Councillor Littlewood, do you want to come in, please?
Thank you, Chair. Well, that was a full explanation and covered a lot of areas. Looking as an overview, we're mentioning AI bots. I envisage a situation where, whether it be in a case of immediate harm or somebody breaking into a house, vulnerability reports or whatever, the person ringing in is going to be somewhat less than stable, probably, and level-headed. Now, I cannot see how, and I'm asking the question, but I cannot see how AI, a chat bot, as it were, is going to be able to cope with emotion, because they're going to be talking extremely quickly. They're not going to be responding to the emotional feedback that they're receiving because of the way the questions are being asked. So my question really is, how would it ever be or is it at the moment in the planning process to ever use AI in immediate frontline responses? Because the public need to be assured that that is the case, because I can understand that people would get extremely frustrated. I get frustrated trying to use a chat bot online, and its vocabulary isn't sufficient. So probably you've answered the question already to a certain extent, but I think reassurances are needed.
Yeah, well, from my point of view, policing is a people person. People only ring 999 or 101 if they've got a problem. They don't ring up and say, well done. And it's probably the first time they've ever rung. So it is really important that there's a human response. All I would say about AI is it can't take over policing, because policing is about people. It's about interacting with people. But what it can do is it can create some efficiencies in gathering data, not dealing with the public, in gathering data for our own purposes.
Councillor Littleford?
I was hoping for a reassurance, but I accept what you say.
What it sounds like you're describing would be a 999 call. There is no intention in the UK to use AI screening for 999 calls. I can give you, so the system I've alluded to, it will retrospectively transcribe every call that lands into the FCR. It will screen it for key phrases, words, references, and then it will flag risk to a human quality assessor or supervisor if it feels the call handler has missed that risk. That's the system we get.
Thank you. I think that's the explanation that I was looking for. Thank you.
Councillor Wally-Hoggins, please.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for the update, and I also thank you for your honesty with regard to the performance of the system. I think that that's quite refreshing, actually. Notwithstanding that, however, we do still have a situation, and I'm sure that other councillors sitting at this table will confirm this, that there are many people now that just don't bother to report crimes because nothing happens. It's just repeated crime, particularly theft of tools, that kind of thing. Can you give me, you mentioned the fact that there were 8 crimes, I think it was, that can be reported online. For the purpose of this and for the purpose of the minutes for this meeting, can you tell us what are those 8 crimes that people can report online and will be given a crime number, I assume, and therefore not visited by the police? Is that correct? Thank you. I will have more questions than this.
No problem. Okay, so the 8 crime types, so your criminal damage under 5,000, standard. And then it's theft act offence, it's theft from motor vehicle, low-level theft, low-level public order. It's those sort of very low-level offences. They won't necessarily not get a visit from the police. The crime report is automated, and then that's reviewed by, excuse me, gift from my daughter. That's then reviewed by a supervisor who's a sergeant or a police staff equivalent, and they will make a decision whether or not the crime is allocated for investigation based on what's called a solvability matrix, that I'm not going to bore you with, or whether it is suitable for filing at source. I would accept that a lot of crimes in the UK are filed at source based on a proportionate assessment, so I wouldn't sit here and have that debate with you about the figures, if you like, which are nationally available. Once then allocated, we use a crime allocation model, and that will dictate who that crime goes to. Predominantly, all of those crimes will go to volume crime investigation units. Very few would go to CID, if you want to call it that. Thank you. However, I take some reassurance from the single online home system where people have perhaps decided not to wait on 101 and have used single online home for one of the 8 crime types that isn't actually pointed towards them. It has then captured risk that I feel we would have missed by that person just thinking, I'm not going to bother. So it doesn't bind you to the 8 crime types. You can work outside of those, and then that will flag up risk to a supervisor. The average turnover on those crimes is under 24 hours, so they will be reviewed by a person within 24 hours.
I think to follow up from what you just said then, I would like to know, you can do that in a written response to us, what those 8 crimes are. You also mentioned antisocial behaviour. We're coming into summer months now when we all know that there's an uptick in this kind of behaviour. I'm sure you're all really excited about that. But I think, therefore, from what you've just mentioned, and it was a tiny portion, that we do need to get some serious messaging out as to what to do with antisocial behaviour, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and probably advice for parents as to what their responsibilities that they should have as well with regards to their young people and the activities that they get up to. So could we expect, do you think, that we'll have some messaging, that's clear messaging that's going out, or are we just going to just carry on and hope for the best that people get fed up on 101 lines moaning about it? Because for older people, antisocial behaviour, depending on what it is, can be really distressing. We all know that.
Just about reporting, I think you're probably using anecdotal evidence. Most people I speak to say they do report a crime. We obviously encourage everybody to report a crime. With social media, there is now a system whereby crimes seem to be sort of percolated, if you like, throughout the whole community, and they also report crime. And the as you heard, the number of crime reports coming in are increasing. So in the past, when I started this job 10 years ago, more people said to me that they wouldn't report crime because of the reasons you expressed, but that is now reduced considerably, in my view.
Straight back to you, Mr. Seckham. What is your evidence that backs up that, your statistical evidence that backs up the assertion that you've just made?
Well, I mean, you cannot, there is no evidence of people not reporting crime. It's just not there. It's not collected, it's not collated, so I don't know, but I'd refer the same question back to you. How do you know how many people are not reporting crime?
So therefore the response that you've given to me is over the last 10 years since you've been Police Crime Commissioner, is indeed anecdotal itself. I'll rest my case, thank you.
I think perhaps to move this forward, if members, and we could pass this to all members of the council, if they've got details, not going into specific details, I know, where they know people have not regularly reporting, or when they go to their parish councils and town councils and they hear about these things, I think it would be good to let the Police and Crime Commissioner know that some parts of our district or parts of the community are still reluctant to do so. So again, if we can get some, rather than anecdotal evidence, more concrete evidence to say. But Councillor Keith, I think you're going to come on evidence.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Well, it's interesting, this discussion. My wards includes Meon Vale, and we've had some issues down at Meon Vale recently. And in fact, Sid Hammond has been coming to parish council meetings, and Quinton as well. So it's really welcome to see somebody from the police at the parish council meetings. And I was chatting to Sid actually, and he said, you know, we do need to encourage people locally to try and report crime so that we can capture the data. And he said people think, you know, if they post on Facebook, that's kind of like reporting a crime. And he said it isn't. It's not good enough. We need to use the proper 101 system to report, and then we can gather the evidence. And in fact, you know, I can just speak for Meon Vale and Shackleton. We've got some issues there now at Long Marston Airfield, but you know, just that we are collectively as councillors, we can do something through our parish councils and residents associations to get the message across that's really important to continue to report. And don't think that just by sending a WhatsApp round or a Facebook post that is reporting. That's my experience anyway, Chair, and it's refreshing to see the police constables coming along to the parish council meetings.
Yep. I'm going to say, I think the other thing as well, if we do a commitment that if we do have the formal words from the police or yourselves, that we can put in our newsletters that, again, the importance of reporting it through proper methods as well. I think it just gets that message going. Councillor Wally-Hoggins, I did cut you up, so if you've got some more questions, I'll bring you back in, then I've got Councillor Ballinger. Yeah,
I'm disappointed that the Inspectorate are repeatedly dissatisfied with elements of policing in Warwickshire, so we never seem to get a clean bill of health in one report. There's always other things that they come back and visit 12 months later. That is the overall performance of Warwickshire Police, I guess. So I hope that in the next inspection that all boxes are ticked and there's no further cause for concern, but I suspect that that isn't going to be the case. There is a list of questions here, and I'm assuming that we will be getting written responses to these questions. Otherwise, there was no point in submitting them previously and in good time, Chair. I would say that we need to do that. We've all got anecdotal information, but you know, I represent the south of the county. 97 burglaries apparently in the Ships-on-Stour area. Only one burglary solved, according to some statistics that I saw. There was a national evidence based. It was reported in a newspaper, and you could click on your area across the whole of the United Kingdom as to what the solve rate was on that. That's really disappointing for our residents. It's not very reassuring. I also want to talk about dangerous dogs as well, because that's a real issue in my area, and also to do with sheep worrying. 97 burglaries and one of those burglaries being solved, I would suggest, is not really good enough. Thank you.
Okay. I don't know what period that covers. In 12 months. Yeah, not good enough. I've agreed with the Chief Constable that every invasive burglary, in other words, a perpetrator gets into somebody's house, not outbuildings, into their house, into their space, there will be, and there has been 100% recently, visits from a police officer to talk to the victim. Now, solving a burglary crime is not my job. I might ask perhaps one of the sergeants if you could explain about attending a burglary and what you can and can't do when you've been.
Yeah, I'll take that one, especially as it's my area in Shipston-on-Stour. So there's several strands to it. A police officer will attend in the first instance to say what we call golden hour inquiries. So they will take a statement off the victim, assess if scenes of crime are suitable to attend and gain forensic evidence, and then complete local inquiries in the area, such as house to house, or a CCTV trawl to see if there's anything that covers. That's often more challenging in a rural area like Shipston. And then post that, they will raise an investigation. It'll be triaged and reviewed by a sergeant, and then moved on to a secondary investigation team, which is normally our serious and organised crime detectives, who cover the entire south of the county. Where it comes to us and my team is the Safe and Neighbourhood team will then conduct a follow-up visit with the victim, separate to the investigation side, where we will speak about crime prevention, but also conduct some of those inquiries again, the golden hour inquiries, to see if anything was missed. So in other words, it's covered twice, so that any immediate evidence that we can gather, we do. And then that is fed back into the serious and organised crime team, who will carry on with the investigation of the burglary. I can't speak for their investigation because I don't work on that department, but it's a team of experienced detectives who are very experienced in investigating burglaries, and they'll spend a lot of time pinning together the picture where you have repeat offenders, particularly, or organised crime groups or links. So they're very good at that and monitoring the intelligence. Sometimes an outcome for a burglary can happen sometimes years after it has occurred, because forensic data that we recovered at the time might not become linked to a known suspect until much later. For example, if somebody is not in the system at the time when you take the forensic data, so if I take a fingerprint and that person isn't in the national database, that won't flag up, but they could be arrested in 5 years' time and their fingerprints obtained, and then we get a hit, and then that would lead to an outcome. So that's the general local process as to what happens with burglaries.
For that detail, as I say, one solved burglary in 12 months is still, I would suggest, disappointing for residents, and adds to their feeling of being vulnerable in rural areas, given the response times out there as well. And some of those are quite high value burglaries as well. So
yeah, I'd have to
I'm
look
sure you
into
can't
that.
comment on individual.
Brilliant, thank you for that. Councillor Ballinger, thank you for waiting. Your turn is to come.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Oh, good morning, sorry. It's still good morning. I'm Councillor Tom Ballinger, and I'm the Councillor for Worcester West. So first of all, we had a really positive meeting yesterday with Sergeant Ebbs and the local police force with the local town council to discuss crime prevention in Ulster. I do have a couple of questions, though. Number one is for Superintendent Maloney regarding those figures that you've just stated around calls that are received on a day-to-day basis. Would you say it's fair to say, or is it on par with the national average around, given the size of Warwickshire, that those figures are relatively quite low? Linking back into what Councillor Wally Hoggins has just said around actually, are people actually raising stuff?
So that's two parts. So linked to the national average, relative to the size of force, that's quite high. We work in a thing called most similar groups of forces. Actually, if you look at the forces we're compared to, it's not probably the most accurate group we could be amongst. So within our group, we have a high volume of calls. We also have a very large metropolitan city covering the county in half, which delivers crime issues that those other forces that we're compared to don't usually suffer. Do people report? I mean, I've already alluded to the single online home changes. What we are now waiting to see with that recent piece of automation, will ASB and crime reports that go into the portal reduce demand on 101? Now, like I say, at the minute, the data isn't quite correlating, but it's very new. Moving forward, should we see more people using the portal to report crime in ASB, then we should see a reduction in 101 calls that drops us down on par with other forces. And then the final risk with comparison is every different force uses different reporting mechanisms and has different portals and bots and this and that. But to cover the main point, Warwickshire has a disproportionately high level of demand relative to the population in the force, which is growing.
I've got a couple more, if that's okay, Chair. And then second of all, unfortunately, I had quite a bad experience myself with 101 where I had to log a crime last year. And it was actually quite appalling. The service I got at the time, I actually phoned back and after raising it with officers here at SDC, and I asked to relog it. I mentioned at that time I was a councillor, and then all of a sudden, people were looking into it. So how can we get confidence up? Again, linking back into what Sarah Hoggins has said, to report crimes, and how can we promote it positively that actually if they do log a crime, it's going to absolutely get looked into?
Doing what we say we're going to do, get it right first time, and then getting something right that the police aren't always great at, which is publicising actually what a good job we often do. Internally, we often congratulate each other, and then the public side of it, perhaps we're not as efficient as we could be at letting people know what we've done, albeit Warwickshire has actually got a very, I think, having worked in different police forces, a very good corporate communications and very good safer neighbourhood connection, if you like. It's trust and confidence. It's the only way to do it. The way you get increasing trust and confidence is delivering an excellent service and getting outcomes for people who expect that from us. It's a really simple, it sounds simple, it's hard to deliver, but it's a simple answer.
And then my last one, Chair, thank you. And this is for the PCC. So given the increase in council tax that you have enlisted on our residents, what could we see in terms of benefit to, what are they going to get in return for that in terms of more resource, given the fact that although Sergeant Ebbs and the local safer neighbourhood team do an incredible job, they have such a large area to cover. Ulster is the 4th largest town within the district. What are you going to do to put resource into significant towns like Ulster, Shipston, and so forth, just to make sure that my residents have confidence in the police?
Okay, I think that's principally about budgeting, isn't it? So we have put considerably more money since I started in 2010. The number of officers has gone up by over 1/3, whereas other forces have lost officers since 2010. So we have prioritised recruiting and retaining police officers. So just another fact that's interesting is that the National Audit Office tells us that Warwickshire has had, as a police area, has had the biggest growth of population in the country. 12.5% since 2010, and it looks as though it's going to keep growing by looking at some of the potential local plans that are coming out. But yet we have received the biggest reduction in central government funding, incidentally, or coincidentally, of 12.5% as well. So we've been stretched from both ends. So keeping Warwickshire resilient financially has been a challenge. We are resilient. The government figures that they spread about saying we're putting so much into policing each year is predicated on our local council taxpayers having to foot 2/3 of that extra bill. So I am constantly arguing that the funding formula, which at the moment is in for national policing and distribution of monies from the Home Office, is unfair to Warwickshire. The previous government and the current government have refused to look at that formula. And now, of course, with potential police reform and mergers and everything else, I think it's probably gone onto the back burner. But Warwickshire has been disadvantaged. So this year's budget, which we set in early February, we've put more resource and to expand the response capability, which is principally 999, and to improve that response when they get there. We have protected and strengthened our neighbourhood policing teams, which of course helps with visibility. One of the most commonly raised topics with me when I go out to any community, and been out to most of yours, is I never see a policeman. It's about visibility. We have also improving investigations and increasing the numbers of offenders brought to justice as a result of that. Improving call handling, you've heard of that, and maintaining service and improving standards. Investing in people. We're currently about to embark on a complete renovation of the old learning and development block where we can do a lot more training, both for recruits and in-career CPD type training. And skills fade is something that happens in all businesses, certainly does in the police. We have invested huge sum into technology. We were the first force in the country to go to the iPhone smartphone, which every officer now has out on the ground. Every officer also has a laptop, and we've developed a number of apps to assist officers out on the ground. So, for example, a statement can now be made from a victim and then signed on site. It doesn't have to go back to be written and then back out to sign again for the victim. So it's all about efficiencies. I've also asked the Chief Constable to make £2 million worth of savings, which he has done. My own office, we've made £100,000 worth of savings to contribute to the budget. And going forward, we'll have to see what happens. As I've said, there's a lot of question marks up there. But for at least 2 years, I will make sure that business as usual is carried out, that the police force strive to be as efficient and expert and professional as they can, and we'll wait and see what happens in the future.
Again, I think trust and competence is the key word from members here and yourselves, and I think when the inspection outcomes from HMRC FRS about performance improvements, particularly around the 101 and different things that Councillor Keithley mentioned, it'd be good if those improvements are noted and then made clear to the public, because I think sometimes they don't know. It's almost a bit like the Monty Python sketch, what did the Romans do for us? Yeah, some of us are probably old enough to remember that, and also the Romans, but we won't go there. I wasn't looking at you there, Councillor Johnson. I think it's important that we do get that out and the message out. So again, it's a part about rebuilding trust. And when you've got somebody external like HMRC FRS, if they're saying it's working, say it's working, let us know. If there are still shortfalls, let us know about the shortfalls and what's been done to rectify those shortfalls. I think that'd be fair. Right, I've got 2 more people I'll bring in. I've got Councillor Littlewood and Councillor Wally Huggins, and then I think we'll bring this to a close because it's been going on a little while now. Thank you. Councillor Littlewood, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my question has actually been brought up by residents, and it's about cross-border police border cooperation. In the part of my ward I'm referring to, which is Ratley and Upton, they have OX postcodes, and there's been incidents which I know you'll be familiar with some miscreants driving in the evening in one direction, headlights full on and throwing bricks into windscreens. I had a couple of occasions with residents who've contacted me to see what can be done, because they phoned up 101 and been told that no, maybe it wasn't 101 actually. They contacted the police with their car had been hit to report it, and to be told, well, you're not in Warwickshire, so you need to contact Thames Valley. So that person, and both of them said the same thing, that having contacted Thames Valley in Banbury and been told, well, you're in Warwickshire. Now, the question really is, for clarity, is there cooperation? There's three questions. Cooperation, what is it? Is it to do with where the crime is committed or where the residents live? And is it the person where they live, or that's the same question. Residents, addresses, or crime taking place. So it's quite it's a bit irritating for people, and I don't want you to comment on the particular crime we're talking about. It's a situation.
Yeah, I've heard about this. Obviously, I live in your ward, as you know, and it is outrageous that there is a lot of cross-border cooperation, and there is small maps on screens aren't always totally accurate. But I'll ask if you could just say when a crime is reported, as to the geography of it, how is it dealt with?
Okay, our CAD system uses a gazetteer based on your address in the control room. That should flag when you live on the county or not. The honest question is, I've never heard of a gazetteer failing based on an address, and now have.
Well, I think it's more that the crime is. We've got Edge Hill, as you know.
Yep.
Not far beyond the top of it, you're into Thames Valley in Oxfordshire, in Warwickshire. Now, these crimes, I think, have been happening both sides of the border. So, what is the response? How do we liaise with Thames Valley? Yeah.
If a crime from another police area is reported to us, we record that crime. We shouldn't actually tell that person to phone the other police force. We should record that crime on us, and it would be transferred to the other force with a handover. It will go to an equivalent supervisor in the next police force, and they will take the investigation forward. In terms of broader interoperability between our border forces, they have governance procedures in place that are managed, that have been in place for years, and for chronic problems, serious organised crime, etc., they're very effective. For that incident you're referring to, when it's individual crime types, that would fall back down to what's called crime transfer policy between postcodes.
The society today is very reliant on postcodes. Postcodes are for the post office and don't reflect geography in any way. It's a convenience, and I wonder if people look at a postcode and think, "Oh no, that's not us."
The system, the CAD system, the gazetteer system we're boy with, should not do that. So your address is plotted within the county border. It doesn't bring up your postcode; it brings up a pinpoint of your address. So I'm confused as to how that's happened, if I'm being really honest with you.
Well, rather than continue with this, perhaps you could drop me a note with an answer, because residents would appreciate that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'll get the individual incident details from you.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilde-Haugens, you can have a last word on this, please.
I do want to bring up a dangerous dogs matter, but I'm going to do that outside the meeting, please. It's important that I make you aware of something that's happened before you leave the building, if that's okay. However, I'm going to come back to something that Mr. Seckham mentioned, that you have required your office to make £100,000 worth of savings, but that on that, you then, I'm fairly appalled to hear that you've asked the Chief Constable to make a somewhat disproportionate amount of £2 million worth of savings. I'm sure that everybody in this room will agree that the optics around that are fairly dreadful. So I asked the uniformed officers here then, how is that £2 million worth of savings going to affect frontline policing in Warwickshire and had a £2 million worth of savings in a county that is getting bigger with more demand and more residents, how are you going to ensure that already stretched services are maintained? Because that's a fairly hefty chunk of any budget to be taken out. So the next part of the question is, what is you are the frontline officers, there's two of you sitting here now. What is your greatest fear when you go out?
Councillor White, I can see it.
Sorry.
I think that's more of a strategic level, so I don't think it's fair on the sergeant to answer that question. I think from an operational point of view, I think Mr. Seckham and Superintendent Malone, who's sort of like the representing the Chief Constable, the senior officers in the West Warwickshire Police, I think might be. But again, I think there might be some extra response needed from the Chief Constable or the Deputy on the £2 million as well. Particularly in terms of context, the 100,000, how much is that part of the OPCC budget, and the £2 million, how much is that as a proportion of the Warwickshire Police's budget? So I think I can understand the gist of the question. I don't think it's. I think we've got the question there. I think we can get some answer to it, but if we get a fuller answer, and again, if you liaise with me, Councillor Wally-Huggins, in terms of your question to send to them. I mean, that specific one, I don't think that was so. If we'll get a specific answer on that one, I think that, and we will publish those as part of the minutes.
I can just answer it briefly. Warwickshire Police costs £185 million a year to run. That's the budget I'm responsible for. All but 4 million of that goes to the Chief Constable. So I've asked the Chief Constable to make savings of 2 million on a budget of 180 million. My office costs 1.2 million and I'm making savings of 100,000. That's nearly 10%. So I wanted to give the message to the public that the priority for all the money I have is the frontline policing. And by the way, those efficiencies will not disrupt or affect the front line. These are savings to be made, colloquially called back office savings, in our administrative departments. And I think most residents would agree with that. That the prime aim of me collecting money off council taxpayers is to improve policing. The administrative side has an important part to play, but I believe that most of our residents, if not all of our residents, want to see more police officers, principally as a result of paying more money. And I think we're very happy to write to you, Chair, with more detail on this, if you wish.
Yeah,
I also want to say we'll also reply to all the questions as well.
Yeah, I think that's fine. And again, we'll put those as part of the minutes, and they'll get agreed at the next OSC. Again, they will be in the public domain, so members of the public can use them or look at them as well. So I think that's fair. We've been open and transparent. We're now coming up to nearly 11:20. I think we all need to let our guest speakers disappear. If we have a break till 11:25, slightly might be an odd minute, and then we'll restart. And I think we've got Mr. Buckland next, who's going to talk about local government.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, welcome back. Thank you for indulging everybody with a small break after completion. The OPCC is gone. Next item, we've got another guest speaker, our eminent Chief Executive, Mr Buckland, who will be giving us an update on devolution and local government reorganisation. Hopefully that's a big enough build-up for you, Mr Buckland, and cut to far away, please.
Brilliant, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Just to give an update on what's happened since the last meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee and what we're expecting to happen in the near future, if that's okay. So, firstly, the deadline passed on the 26th of March for the government consultation on the proposals for Warwickshire. The Council responded to those that consultation exercise supporting the 2 unitary Warwickshire in line with the Council decision that was made on the 17th of November. The government also launched a new consultation exercise in early February to talk about the establishment of spatial development strategy areas and foundation strategic authorities. Quite a short consultation period on that. That also ended on the 26th of March. The Council responded along with all of the leaders from the district and borough councils and the county council, inviting the ministers to come and have a conversation effectively within Warwickshire. On the 25th of March, the government announced their decisions, subject to parliamentary approval, for the areas going through local government reorganisation in the priority programme area. And the decisions in these areas was as follows. For Essex, Southend and Thurrock, there will be 5 unitary councils established with an average population of almost 400,000. In Norfolk, 3 unitary councils will be implemented with an average population of 308,000. Hampshire, there will be 5 councils, average population 426,000. And then in Suffolk, 3 unitary councils will be implemented with an average population of 253,000. Interestingly, the government didn't make a decision in relation to East and West Sussex, and we're going to expect a decision in relation to those areas hopefully soon. We are expecting still the governmental decisions in relation to the other 14 county council areas, including Warwickshire, in July, and we expect that to be just before Parliament rises in July this year. So that's the national context. Locally, we are working collaboratively with all of the district boroughs and the county council on what's being deemed the model neutral preparations. PricewaterhouseCoopers have been jointly commissioned by the 6 councils to act as the delivery partner for that exercise. And we've already had a few discussions with PwC, got one scheduled for Friday this week. PwC have supported a number of councils going through LGR, most recently North Yorkshire. In relation to those proposals, 6 work streams have been established, each with a lead officer from the council. For people and culture, that's going to be led by Leila Doman. For finance, Richard Burrell, our 151 officer, will lead that. Commercial includes procurement, and Charlotte Hume will be leading that for us. For assets, newly appointed Nick Jakes will be taking that role. Legal governance and democratic will be led by Marcia Eccleston, and digital and ICT by Jason Lorenz. Now, the 6 chief executives are also acting as a project sponsor for one of those particular areas, and I will be the project sponsor for finance. We've also got an authority lead on LGR to support myself, and that will be Julie Lewis. Julie will be supporting a lot on the project management information, and you possibly have seen also we've just advertising for a project management officer to support Julie in that role. Following the decision that we're expecting in July, as I've mentioned before, we would expect something called a structural changes order to be published in the autumn. That would tell us what kind of governance has to be put in place between then and then the mayoral, not the mayoral elections, pardon me, the May 2027 elections for the shadow councils. And when those council elections come into place in May 2027, there was a briefing note that I circulated to members a couple of weeks ago talking about then the restrictions that would be placed upon the council on decision making until the new councils go live in April 2028. So, for instance, that would be no revenue decision of more than £100,000 or capital decisions of £1 million without that being considered by the shadow council firstly. And then, given that the tests are passed about safe and legal, and there are 2 tests that the government are requiring upon us, the expectation would be that we would go live with the new authority or authorities in April 2028. So, Chair, happy for any questions.
Thank you, Mr Buckland. Councillor Rice, well done, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. David, I was just reading the minutes of our last meeting, and I believe Tony mentioned that the council received a letter from the ministry inviting expressions of interest to establish spatial development strategies and devolution geographies for parts of England currently without a strategic authority. And I just wondered what had happened since then.
Okay. Sorry, Chair, that was the second point that I raised about the consultation exercise that was raised in early February. We have had conversations with areas including Gloucestershire and Worcestershire. Gloucestershire are very clear that their preference would be to join the West of England Combined Authority, which is Bristol and South Gloucestershire way. Herefordshire and Worcestershire would be interested should it arise that we go into a Foundation Strategic Authority with them. However, we haven't made a formal response on any of those proposals at the moment, other than the joint letter that I referred to from all the leaders from the District of Boroughs and the County Council, actually to give the opportunity to explain the complexities that arise locally about devolution and how we have been non-constituent members of the West Midlands Combined Authority for several years now, how actually a lot of the economic geography for Warwickshire does centre around Coventry, and how things like the health geography, which is Coventry and Warwickshire Integrated Care Board, how that would work under those kind of arrangements. So we haven't made a formal response as yet. The consultation paper did talk about conversations starting on the 21st of March. We've asked for that conversation to come and actually invited the 2 ministers to come to Warwickshire to have a conversation.
I'll just have a follow-up on that. When are we likely to do a response to the consultation?
Okay, so we haven't had a response from the minister, the letter to the 2 ministers as yet. We checked that this morning. We expect the decision to be made for Warwickshire on the LGR proposals in July. As I say, that'll probably be sometime just before Parliament rises in July, and I haven't got that particular date, but that seems to be the form that's been followed previously.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Right then, any other questions? I'll say, before you go, I get on one is best from you, Mr. Buckland. Again, I think members of the public would be entitled to know about the mental resources we're putting into this, because this is at a time when we've got lots of things going on. Again, this is putting a strain on officers' workloads. Just wonder if you'd be able to give us some update on how you're coping and what additional work we're doing.
Okay, so if you recall, Council did provide £1 million of support for the process at the budget process in February, and we are looking to take on additional resources in areas such as project management, which were just referred to, finance, HR and legal. We'll be getting some support into support those particular areas as well. Government have talked about capacity support being available, and a sum of £63 million has been announced, which, given that there's 21 areas, you could do the maths, but it hasn't quite worked out that way because government have made the first allocations of that to the 4 county council areas which have had their determinations made, and that will help with support and resourcing through that programme.
Councillor Ballinger, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just obviously sticking my professional human resources hat on now, Mr. Butland. I just wanted to kind of like just check in and sort of like see how staff morale is and just making sure kind of like, are we doing any check-in sessions with them just kind of like along the way? Obviously, because I appreciate it might be a bit topsy-turvy for them.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. So I do a series of what we call chief chats, and absolutely every one of those is led by local government reorganisation. I think in reality, until the decision is made about whether it's a 1 or 2, it hasn't really landed as a major issue at the moment, but I'm sure it will do when that determination is made.
Yeah, I think Councillor Ballinger's just prompted me to ask this as well. Is that I think HR are going to be busy over the next few months. We've already gone down the process of trying to recruit extra staff in the planning area because of the huge amount of planning applications coming in, and I noticed the portfolio holders here, so I think he'll acknowledge that there's been some significant attempts to recruit staff to help with the workload, and then obviously this additional staff we're trying to recruit to help this process as well. So you might have to recruit extra HR staff to cope with the additional workload as well. So I think it's a fair point, and like I say, I think Councillor Ballinger's point about morale and also about recruitment and retention of staff is quite important as well. So challenging times ahead, but when there's challenges, there's also benefits as well. So I think that obviously recruiting to Stratford and to come to see chief officers like yourselves and Mr. Perks and Mr. Nash who sat by me, just in case they throw something at me, I'm sure that's always added attraction to come and work at Stratford District. So thank you for that. Any other comments on that? Don't need to have to say anything, Mr. Perks, on that one. I think that would be good. So brilliant. So thank you for the update, Mr. Buckland, and we'll look forward to reading the minutes of the outcomes that we've agreed upon. So thank you. Next item on the agenda is the Task and Finish Group privately managed public open spaces, flood alleviation schemes and estate roads. It will be on pages 9 to 18 of our agenda. Councillor Johnston, do you want to
Thank you, Chair.
give us an update, please?
I'm happy to say this is probably the most difficult thing that I've had to try and deal with as a member of both of my two sessions on the District Council and a member of the County Council. Fundamentally, this is a significant and important issue, but the District Council's powers at the present time to intervene are fairly limited. There are a great deal of concerns raised. Individual members are frequently engaged by residents and residents' groups. The District Council can't renegotiate 106 agreements. It has some powers of enforcement, and 106 agreements differ. In some, the District Council, where they can negotiate their own planning, after their own planning consents. But when decisions are taken, and several of them were in the past, by planning inspectors, our ability to influence the content of them is reduced. We've taken a great deal of evidence, including surveys of residents and of parish councils, and we've taken verbal evidence as well from residents and parish councils, and we've made a series of recommendations which are outlined on page 9 of the report. I would just refer you to the actual remit, which was agreed by the Cabinet and Council, which is on page 12, paragraph 1.4. And I think we've exceeded that remit fairly significantly, and I'm sure that's absolutely proper that we did do so. Some of the recommendations are to assist members, local councils and residents' associations who are looking at adopting public open space. That's recommendations 1 and 2. We have adopted a policy, I think it's 2004, of seeking parish and town councils in the first instance, and then the district council, to consider taking on the management of public open space. And the further recommendations, I think, are as much monitoring the performance of that, looking at whether public open space has been picked up or not in current applications and decisions. Item 5, which is the central record of sites, is actually in the remit. We've got, I think, information that goes back to 2010 at the present time. There were obviously decisions and agreements were made long before that. One that's causing a particular problem in Wellesmore at the moment, I'm sure, goes back to 1990. There are a number of recommendations that have implications for resources, and as I understand the procedure, those will be referred to to the Cabinet from the Council directly. I am concerned about the recommendations in paragraph 10, because these are under active consideration at the present time by government, and if we're not able to contribute to that debate before July, I think we'll be, you know, the horse will have bolted a long time ago. The government is currently considering the response to 2 areas of consultation, one of which this group did look at. They were the deadline for those was the middle of March. So I think at the present time, now is the present time to try and influence that. Some of them may be possibly asking the government to do things that they're unlikely to do. We've had a bit of a struggle with the County Council to find out what their policy on highways adoption and the inspection of SUDS schemes, and we literally had an email this week from the County Council, and I haven't been able to look in detail at the implications of that on SUDS, but it does seem to me that if a SUDS scheme isn't working and not being maintained properly, and there is a flood risk, the local lead flood authority ought to have some authority to do something about it. So I think that's all I want to say. What we're being asked to do is to agree that agree the recommendations to Council, to amend the recommendations or make different recommendations to Council, or make no recommendations at all. But I would commend that we agree to submit these recommendations to Council, subject to Cabinet looking at those which have resource implications.
I'll start with Councillor Wally-Hoggins, then Councillor Passingham, please.
I think that this council is to be commended for actually grasping the nettle and looking into this matter. The fact that really we don't have as much authority as we would like in order to rectify the situation is regrettable, but that is within the gift or otherwise of central government to address this really serious matter. Clearly, these are a blight on the lives for far too many residents across this district, and will continue to do so until some sort of robustness comes out from central government in order to deal with this. But I think that one of the things that's most important for our residents is that who are affected by this is that they have been heard within this district, and you know, Councillor Johnston, it's a difficult task that you've undertaken here. People have been listened to. We've had questions here today, all right. And I think that as far as this council is concerned, there's a lot of proposals here moving forward, and it would be remiss for us not to move those forward in any way that we can, because it does at least give us a line in the sand as to how we would like things to be and moving forward. So I do hope that we can get these recommendations to central government, but most of all, I hope that central government grasp the nettle firmly and deal with this once and for all, because with all the developments coming forward, we're going to be in an even worse situation. So actually, I'd like to thank the group that was involved in this, the Task and Finish group, for their endeavours and what they brought before us today. Thank you.
Mr. Passingham, please.
Yeah, it was interesting, the question from Peter Whelan from the Sandringham Avenue estate in Stratford, in that being on the Task and Finish group, we didn't properly retrospectively look at what happened before 2005 and how we got into this mess. But it was interesting that MP Manuela Portugala has sent this information out to Peter about the question from that was put in Parliament, and the answer from the Minister saying that the takeover of public open spaces would be in the legislation automatically, and that this would be retrospective. So I was wondering whether at this stage the item number 10 on our recommendations to the writing to the Secretary of State for Housing, whether that could be strengthened in saying that we are fully in support of the government's plans to make public open spaces automatically be taken over by local councils. It seems it's the government's intention, but we all know that developers lobby government an awful lot, and they've got a strong lobby that often succeeds. So I'd have thought the more messages that come in from local councils saying that we are in support of what they are intending to do, the more likely it might happen.
Councillor Rice, then Councillor Littlewood, please.
Yeah, I'm going to move the discussion away from that, and perhaps I should wait until we've discussed Councillor Passingham's point, because I'm going to bring up something completely different.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Do you want to follow on, Councillor Littlewood?
Thank you. Happy to do that. I have actually got two questions, but again, I'll defer my second question. Just to continue with what Councillor Passingham just mentioned, I fully agree with that, but I think that central government will be very loath to make any changes that they will see will slow down the development of new housing estates. It just goes against their principles and what they see as their urgent need to for blanket development. Unjustifiably, in my opinion, in some places. We all need houses, but they've got to be the right houses in the right place, and this government isn't addressing that in any way whatsoever. So I think that a stronger note added to that item 10 would be a good thing, but frankly, it'll be seed landing on stony ground, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm going to say my point on that is when I mentioned to Mr. Whelan, it would be interesting to see from MP Portugala what she had back in writing from the Minister, so we know 100% what they intend to do, because I still think there's some... that's the word I was looking for, Councillor Keithy. Well done, you get the prize, thank you. I like that word, good man, thank you. And I don't think we should be making decisions or making comments when there's this ambiguity around. And I think I fully support the response back, especially if it's done in time. But if we're making responses on things we're not 100% clear about, it does potentially undermine our response. So that's just my opinion. I will bring back in a minute, Councillor Passingham. So I think that's that one on there. I've got some other points that I'll leave till later. So if you want, I think we've touched on that point, unless somebody else wants to add on to that. I'm more than happy to bring Councillor Rice back in on a different area. So are you happy, Councillor Rice?
Yes. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Rice, just before we move on. So are we not adding anything into recommendation 10, or are we coming back to that, or we haven't really decided that as far as I was concerned?
I think we're coming back on that.
We're coming back, that's fine.
Mr. Rice? Go on, Councillor Rice, yeah. Yep.
Okay. As I say, a completely different point. Looking at the recommendations, the recommendation number 5, I think I should like to receive some reassurance that there's not going to be some unintended consequences of publicising those estates which have the most punitive costs in terms of maintenance and local charges, because I think that would be rather dangerous to do so.
I think it's a fair point, but I think it's touched on. It's an internal record. But again, we'll follow officers' views on that. Yeah, I think. Mr. Perks, do you want to come in, please?
Yes, with recommendation 5, that's one of the recommendations that would need to sort of be referred to Cabinet for a report on sort of the practicalities of how we'd implement it. I think that's an issue that we'd pick up at that time. I'm very conscious of the risks of sort of blighting estates by showing they've got high management charges, and we'd need to be careful with sort of data protection and sort of unintended consequences. But if it's something that the Council approve in principle, we'll take that forward and look at the detail in the report to Cabinet and make some recommendations then.
Yeah, and I think just to add on to that as well, I think we have a built-in review of number 4 and number 5 because they are quite similar, so they are reviewed on a regular basis. 1 to do with the criteria and 2 the records, so they're not being missed out, because I think that was a problem in the past. Some of the sites weren't exactly on the list, or we didn't know about them, or we've got partial details. So if that's reviewed on a regular basis, I think it adds to the summary. It's no criticism, it's just adding in the fact that it's reviewed on a regular basis. Councillor Littlewood, Councillor Rice, you got another question? No. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, a comment to propose an amendment to 3. It's me being a pedant, I suppose, but I just wanted to add in a phrase after. If you look at, it says to adopt or not adopt public open space to the district council to ensure better monitoring. I think. Sorry, yes, that's right. I would like to add in after district council or subsequent authority, so that this continues into the next authority. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. So I did turn that. I think it's taken as a given that the successor authority will take on the responsibilities that have been agreed by the district council.
Well, they may do it a different way, but yes.
But they may do it a different way. But the obligations still stand, but how they interpret those obligations may be slightly different.
Well, that's my point, really.
The trouble is, we can't tie the hands of a successor authority. They might to do, and they will be democratically elected and to do things a different way. But I can take on your point, and I think the implication is there. But whether we can do it, I've been advised that if it's, to do these things, it might be a legal minefield on that one.
Well, it's on that same point, Chair. If I could just add my own thought on that, or my observation, that this recommendation is a process to be established to enable town and parish councils reporting decisions. That's kind of after the event situation, as I see it. Would it perhaps not be better to be more on the front foot rather than after the decision had been made, such that the local authority could decide whether or not there was some sort of intervention or support required? Because I noticed from the detail of the surveys, which I've got to say, when I read it, was a bit disappointed that only 17 parish councils responded. 40% said they had chosen not to adopt open space and that they were concerned about the obligations and liabilities that came with it. So in respect of number 3, as it reads to me, it's a kind of retrospective, tell us after you've made the decision, and I'm not sure that that puts us in a weaker position than we would be in if we knew in advance of a decision or were party to that.
Yeah, I'm going to say, do you want to come back in and I'll come back in?
Just briefly, I think recommendations 1 and 2 are to encourage parish councils to look at adopting public open space. And the process in number 3 is to make sure we got a record of that and understand why those decisions were taken.
The only other thing I think it could be tied in with number 7, that a report be prepared for consideration by Cabinet to investigate additional support available for parish and town councils considering adoption of the public open space. So that's prior to it, isn't it? So whether number 3 and 7 could be tied in such a way, it's not retrospectively or post-event or whatever phrase. So they've got the opportunity. So I think if we're minded to do that, officers can then...
It's such a big issue for so many people, this adoption of public open space management charges, then we ought really to make sure that where possible, we're party to decision-making process in support of the parish councils or town councils.
So I think officers are getting the flavour of where the committee is going on this one. So whether they could be minded, whether they're minded to strengthen or amend number 3 and 7 to cover our view, to incorporate our view.
Yeah, I think that's the takeaway from this, that potentially there's an opportunity to improve that so it's more proactive rather than retrospective.
Just some good words, ambiguity, proactive. You're earning your money today, Councillor Keithy. So,
difficult to come up with changes to these recommendations on the hoof, though, and I appreciate Mace's having a look to see if he can come up with something, but I think the point of the discussion is that if we're in agreement that potentially something could be improved in this area, then something that the officers could take away.
yeah, what we could do, and again it'll give officers more time, is we raise these concerns, or I raise these concerns at Cabinet on Monday, and therefore it gives officers more time, and then it gives the Cabinet...
Agreed.
Brilliant.
So if we...
So you've got some time.
So in terms of number 3, as Councillor Crum says, we could take that away and get him to report back on Monday. But if we move number 3 so it's reflected something more like to establish a process to enable town and parish councils to liaise with town and parish councils during their decision-making process as opposed to reporting, something like that, to work with, liaise with. So would that be the spirit of what the committee are asking us to try and do, so to make sure we're going in the right direction?
Do you want to come in?
Sorry.
Want to come in?
Yeah. No, well, yeah, I think, Tony, I mean, we're talking about establishing some sort of toolkit to support them. I mean, they are independent organisations to town and parish councils, aren't they? We're not really having no jurisdiction over them at all. But if we're looking to support them on behalf of residents, then that toolkit and early participation in their decision-making in respect of these public open spaces is really important. It's not simply that we will be told after they've made a decision.
Yeah, and again, I think Mace is raising a good point here that we can lead a horse to water, and it'll only, it'll be up to the parish and town council, but we're giving them the opportunity. So I think that's the point, isn't it?
Yes.
Chris Wood?
Well, Chair, just following up on your comment there, I think it's more, yes, it is giving the opportunity, and I agree that is part of the intention, but part of this process is to actually inform what parish and town councils can do, are able to do, and giving that's, if you like, the toolkit. It's giving them the knowledge that they can act safely for their residents, and I think that's the important part. There are 2 parts to this report. There's the one that's going to lobby government to actually make legislative changes, but the most important part in the near future, in the short term and medium term probably, is that we are able to help residents manage the situation. This is it's a grey area. We have residents who are facing very large and uncertain bills on an annual basis, sometimes quarterly changes, and I think it's a very serious issue. We have no powers to do anything about it, but what we can do, our biggest power, is education and information and support in that respect. So I think being careful how this is worded is very important.
Can I just add something to that, please? Yep. Just to throw a bit of light on it. I mean, town and parish councils are making decisions on POS. I've got an example where the parish councils made decisions not to take POS, but residents don't turn up to the parish council meetings. They probably didn't even know that that decision was about to be made. And it's the residents we're protecting here, not the town and parish councils, for goodness sake. Yeah,
like I said, I think we've obviously got several portfolio holders here, and they're hearing what we're saying, how the debate has gone. And I think we've got some reasonable ways to go forward, but ultimately it will be Cabinet to make these decisions based on our thoughts and comments. Mr. Perks, come in then, please.
Assuming that we've sort of finished the debate, which is a bit of a liberty for me as not as the chair of the committee, but nobody's nodding to contradict me. I think where we've got to then is we've got 10 recommendations. We're going to do a little bit of work around recommendation 3, and I suggest what we do is I ask Mr. Allison to sort of come up with a sort of more proactive form of wording along the lines of the committee of suggestion. We'll agree that with Councillor Johnson as the chair of the Task and Finish group, and then Councillor Crump can report that back to Cabinet on Monday as part of his OSC feedback. So in terms of the recommendations, under the Council's constitutions, any recommendations that involve allocation of resources need to be considered by the Cabinet first before the Council. But I'm conscious that the Chair, Councillor Johnson, is concerned that there will be a delay in that. And with the government's sort of debate going on, he's keen that recommendation 10 is debated in more detail at the meeting of the April Council, such that if the Council are supportive of that recommendation, we can write to the Secretary of State and sort of make sure our feelings are known. So what I would propose is that we take recommendations 1 to 9 will be referred to Cabinet for more detailed analysis and resource allocation, and then but recommendation 10 is debated at April Council, and then we can action that sort of more swiftly. So I think that's a summary of where I think we've got to, unless anybody's got a different view.
I've got Councillor Passingham and then Councillor Wally.
Yeah, so on my previous comment then, I'd like to propose that we add a paragraph G to item 10, which says something like, this council supports the return to the pre-2005 situation where public open spaces was automatically taken over by local councils once development is finished. And this is retrospective, which is evidently, yeah.
I'm going to say that would, I think what Mr. Perks says, 1 to 9 can go to the Cabinet because it's got potentially financial implications. Number 10 is going to the government before the consultation date ends. But by adding that paragraph, I think there's potentially financial implications to the council. So therefore, that means it would have to go to council rather than to go to GOM.
You're right, both of you are right, in fact. You couldn't put it in recommendation 10 without affecting the ability to sort of take that, to debate that in April. But I suppose what you could do is you could put it at 9.5, obviously we'd renumber it. You could have an additional recommendation, something along the line that the council support the government's proposal for the automatic mandatory adoption of public open space on all new developments. But before doing that, I would want to check that the government have actually recommended that, because we're not quite clear on, we've got something from Manuela that's being spoken about, but I'd want to be clear that that's actually accurate, which we can take up with the chairman between now and then, if that's what the committee would like us to do.
Yeah, I was just going to say about, yeah, I like the proposal, Tony, but just something like subject to the constraints, because one size doesn't fit all. So there's different areas of land that may have different implications, etc., etc. So we have to put a strong caveat in any provision.
Councillor Johnson, come on, please.
My comment was on the notion of a one-word answer from a government minister. Will it be handled retrospectively? Yes. doesn't describe fully the responsibilities that this council may be being asked to take on, or the resource implications that will go with it. And I would simply, on a one-word answer, I don't think we should be committing ourselves to the project.
Yeah, I'm saying I think that was my. I'll probably bring back in a second, Councillor Massive. I think that was my point, and echoed by Councillor Keith with the word ambiguity. That I think we can't make. I think would undermine our credibility as a scrutiny committee that we're not digging more deeply into what the implication was from a one-word answer. And I think we're premature by putting that bit in until, like I said, until we got something back from the MP and via the Minister. So I wouldn't be happy to bring that in. But Councillor Passingham, you come in.
Yeah, I think this is a matter of principle to support the residents, because, I mean, it's a just totally unsatisfactory position we're all in as councillors and residents are in with the present situation. And if they do pass the legislation going forward, it leaves all the residents since 2005 in a very unfair situation, doesn't it? So just as a matter of principle, not depending on what the government is proposing or not, I think we ought to say this in support of our residents.
I think if you want to come up with a proposal, Councillor Passingham, and get a seconder, we can have a vote on it. But I think several of us made our points, views known on that. But if you want to come up with a proposal about an addition to this, to a recommendation to Cabinet, who will ultimately make the decision, I'm more than happy to take a proposal as long as you got, and then see if you've got a second. Mic on, please.
Yeah, just to say, I think there was a few. The actual wording, as Maester says, there are complications always, but if we can establish a matter of principle that this council supports, I think that's the important thing. And maybe I would like to propose an amendment, roughly as what I said, but with maybe the chair and various other people work out the wording, so that yeah.
Mr. Perks, want to come in, please?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think whilst it's at liberty to this committee to say whatever it sees fit, what we're considering here is the output from quite an extensive task and finish group who've sort of considered these matters and have produced this set of recommendations following a lot of debate and the report has been produced on the basis of that. I think to include another recommendation at this stage, we would need to be sure that that was accurately reflects the discussions at the task and finish group, which it may have done. I didn't attend all of the meetings. And it's just an omission that somebody's forgotten to pick up that was clearly coming out of the group. If it wasn't coming out of that group, I would, again, it's your discretion, but I would question whether that should be introduced at this late stage unless it was fully debated, because otherwise you do run the risk of undermining the credibility of your recommendations that you fully considered. So it's...
Councillor Johnson?
I'd agree with this. This wasn't a topic that was discussed at the task and finish group comprehensively. Obviously, lots of members would like to rewrite history if we could, but we can't. The government might be able to. So, I mean, if Councillor Passingham's made a proposal, maybe we should look for a seconder and take a decision on it.
I think before we do that, I think you've made your point clear. You're chair of this task and finish group, and we're talking about the review from the task and finish group. By taking this vote on this, are you giving tacit approval for an addition to the task and finish group findings that we put in the report? Because I think the point that Mr. Perks has raised is pertinent, but I'm giving you leeway on this one, Councillor Johnson, being as you chaired that meeting.
No, you are correct. This was not discussed at the Task and Finish group. I just, I'm kind of fit in with the options available to the ONS committee, which including amend the recommendations or make different recommendations. And I don't want to close down the option of this committee doing that. So I may be coming at a different angle, but
Yeah.
I'm not getting a sense of overwhelming support for this proposal in this room.
But I think it's the learning point as well. I should bring Councillor Wally-Hoggins in.
Yes, we've sort of gone away from what I was going to talk about, but you know me, I'll come back to it. Councillor Passingham, were you on this Task and Finish group? So I find it extraordinary, therefore, that you're bringing in this amendment over in Scrutiny Committee with this report in front. Okay, and notwithstanding that, so you also get the chance to speak about this as an invitee to Cabinet on Monday. Anyway, can I now park that, please? And can I say that it is disappointing if parishes are given the opportunity to, if you like, take control of the open spaces on new developments. A lot of them seem to be saying no to it, and I wonder if the interim head of development and perhaps a portfolio holder could perhaps spend a little bit of time thinking about how we assist parish councils, or how do we make it help them to perhaps be more receptive to the idea, because I think for many of them, they just think they're going to be burdened with huge financial risk with regard to this. And of course, within that financial risk then, the developers themselves are going to have to front load the contribution to the parish councils in order to take on these open spaces. And I do think that that's something that we do need to address, is the support. It's not just the support for the residents, it's the support for the parish councils in dealing with these matters. I don't really want to do a proposal about that. I would have hoped that that would be something that we could manage, but I think that that is important enough. And I'll bring it up on Monday at Cabinet, if that's okay with you, Councillor Couch, so that we can perhaps have that debate. I think that would work better for all of us, because this is cross-party. This isn't political in any way, shape or form. But we have to make it so that our parish councils and town councils are more receptive to the idea. And that is within our gift as a development, authority, is to say to the developers, right, if you're going to do this, we would prefer it if the parish council took control. This is how much you're going to have to give to that. And I think that that would be a good piece of work, and perhaps the most proactive that we could be. Thank you. Sorry, Chair, did you catch all that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, whilst they're debating, just to respond to that, Councillor Watkins, I think a lot of that was the sort of work that was intended to be carried out under recommendation 1 from my liaison with the group and number 7. So, yeah, I think we're on the same page, as you said.
Amongst I can see the portfolio holder nodding, so I think he's making some notes there, which is helpful. Right, we've had a proposal from Councillor Passingham. I'm looking for a seconder.
Sorry, Chair, I'm not clear what the proposal is.
Yeah.
Shall I read out mine? Yes. Unless you have a better proposal, Councillor Passingham, I think what you were saying was that the council support the government's proposal for the either automatic or mandatory adoption of public open space on all new developments. But as I say, we need to be clear before we put that recommendation through that there is actually a government proposal to do that, and it's not just a single word in a Hansard response.
Mike, please.
Yes. I think one of the other points that came up in Manuela Portugal's response, and she reported that a question had been answered by a minister saying that it would be retrospective. So can we have an extra clause on the end of that saying that's retrospective?
Yes, we could amend it to say the council supports the government's proposal for the retrospective automatic adoption of public open space on all new developments. But again, it would be the caveat that that's actually what the government have said, which we need to check.
It's going forward and retrospective, though, isn't it?
Have we got a seconder for that proposal? No. So the proposal falls. Does anybody else want to speak on this? I've got a couple of quick points on this. Councillor, go on.
On this item?
On this, not specifically. That's fallen. So my point will be on item number 10.
Because with respect, Tony sort of said, well, if we've agreed on what we're going to, if we agreed on the debate on 1 to 9, then we'll move on. But in fact, I didn't get the opportunity to just raise my own personal issues with number 8, which says that affected residents would be encouraged to join a support forum, and that Council asks that members of Parliament and Warwickshire Walk, is that right? Warwickshire, yeah, Walk do the same. I mean, my question in that respect is, well, it seems like a very, very wishy-washy number 8, with greatest respect to those that came up with it. It doesn't sort of say who's going to run the support forum, what the governance for that is going to be, whether it's lawfully constituted, what authorities it has. So I'm just raising an issue with you, Chair, that I feel that number 8 is, you know, if residents read that, they'll be wondering what we're asking them to be encouraged to do. It's very wishy-washy, in my personal opinion.
Mr. Alison, do you want to come in, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I take your point, Councillor Keithley. This recommendation at one time was more specific about a specific forum that's mentioned in the report. It's been set up by a resident from Shipston. And I think I also mentioned how many, yeah, it has over 100 members currently. It's called the Stratford District New Build Forum. The reason why this recommendation is now a bit more vague is because we don't want to show any preference to any particular forum should any others arise. Just keeping it vague and open so that, you know, be accounting for any change of circumstances in the future. But at the moment, this is the one that we're encouraging residents to join, and we have been supporting in setting that up.
Okay, thank you, Howard. So you understand? I mean, you've said, haven't you, that you're leaving it open-ended in case that other support forums pop up. I'm just wondering what the value is in number 8, personally, especially since only 17 parish councils bothered to reply to the consultation.
I've got Councillor Jenny Fradgley, and then Councillor Jenny Fradgley, please. Then I'll bring you in, Councillor Johnston.
May I just say that I think we've reached the end of the debate, and could I recommend that we actually take a vote on this?
I think it's for me to decide on that. I've got a point that I want to raise, so I respectfully will disagree with you on Councillor Fradgley. Thank you for that. Councillor Johnston, please.
I just want to say that the parish councils might not have responded. This is for residents and residents' groups. And of the order of 200, and it was north of 200 residents responded to the survey. And we have already assisted the resident from Shipston in contacting the residents who responded to us. So this is well underway. It isn't something airy-fairy.
Thank you for that. My point just relates to item number 10. Whilst I can see the well-meaning behind some of these, I think we're potentially opening a can of worms. I think some of those are going to be embroiled in legislation, particularly C, that local highways authorities be given powers to enforce highways issues on privately managed roads. I think that one is going to be difficult. D, I think that, well, I'm going to say that's what the intention of things are, so they do take them on to be adopted, but again, there's some ambiguity around that one. And E, I think, isn't that a planning breach potentially? Isn't sustainable SUD schemes part of the planning approval?
Yes, it probably is, Chair. It depends.
So therefore, is there an enforcement issue if the But yeah, I'm gonna say I think yeah, I think there's some ambiguity around there, and I think that more likely sits with us, and I think with C&D, I think that's going to be a right kind of worms, and it'll be pushed down the road, and I think we will struggle. So I'm concerned about raising and managing expectations on this, but I can see that the principles are laudable. Sentiment principles, yeah, definitely. So that's just my thoughts on the matter. So I don't know, I might be in a minority of one here, but as chair, I can say these things within reason, of course. Any other comments?
Well, I don't think you're in a minority of one, because I agree with quite a bit of what you said. I think that some of these authorities don't have these powers that we're suggesting that are adopted.
Councillor Johnson?
We're suggesting the government should give them those powers. We're not saying they have them now, but if the management of the Competitions and Markets Authority recommendation was fundamentally that private management companies should have national standards, adopted standards, and that there should be an authority that enforces them. And we're just encourage them along with that, I think.
And maybe the recommendation should be slightly broader than the specific recommendations to these individual components of the local authority. That what you're really asking the government to do when they consider tightening up this legislation in respect of management companies and leasehold charges and such like, that there are greater powers given to the local authorities to deal with breaches of performance.
Mr. Perks, please.
If I can help the committee here, this particular report is part of a suite of action that you're taking. We responded in quite a lot of detail to a very detailed consultation on private management companies that tease these matters out in more detail, and your response to that consultation recognised the general principle that you would want things adopted in public open space and built to suitable standards, but it recognised that there were some circumstances where that may need to be tempered. So you've given a more detailed response to that already as a committee, or we have as a council, to be honest, because it went through that process. So I don't think the fact that you're endorsing these as overarching principles is a problem, because you've given a more detailed response to occasions where you might need to temper that, or things that might need to change in your detailed consultation response we've already provided. So that may give you some comfort, or it may not.
Again, just going back on this, I just thought of this as well, is that playing devil's advocate, we are a planning authority, which I still think covers the SUDs, but we are then potentially creating additional workloads for another authority, which will obviously probably will be the successor authority. So I think that by doing this, we should ensure that the Highways Authority or the Flood Authority are also aware of the financial implications of doing this. I think B covers a lot of those, and it could be expanded in a way to cover the recommendations from the Competition and Markets Authority relating to private management companies to be implemented, to consider highways issues on privately managed enforcement highways, including powers of enforcement on highways issues arising out of privately managed roads, adoptable standards and enforcement. So we don't specifically identify who's responsible for all those, but we need to make that the Competition and Market Authority, that they should have some responsibility of putting that in. So that was just my thoughts on it.
That sounds great. So no doubt you can pass that on when you're at Cabinet.
Councillor Johnson, do you want to come back on that?
Not particularly. I have to say that I was relatively content with B before the last meeting of the Task and Finish group. And I did feel we need to be specific about the non-public open space aspects, which I think are in many ways more problematic. They're the things we're not asking parish councils to take on. But I do think that the public authorities the government should be giving the public authorities the expectation that they will enforce failure by the private management company.
Well, I'll say I've still got reservations about CD&E. I think what I proposed suggested was a more pragmatic way of doing things. I still think there's some uncertainty about the responsibility under E. I still think that's a planning one, which is us rather than the Leaf Local Flooding Authority. But I think that B could be expanded to encompass those, but not in a less specific way, because I think if we do this, there's going to be considerable pushback, whereas the Competitions and Market Authority may have a different view on this. So that's just my thoughts. But
you could, if you wanted to, amend recommendation B, that the recommendations for the Competition and Markets Authority relating to private management companies and the adoption of infrastructure be implemented. And that would give you generic coverage of the things below, and that would allow you, if the committee wanted to drop out the specific references in C, D and E. So you would have recommendation A, the slightly expanded recommendation B, and recommendation F going forward under recommendation 10 to Council.
Councillor Rice, please.
And on that point, going back to what the Deputy Chief Executive said about half an hour ago, are we separating 10 from the rest of the recommendations and suggesting that 10 should be debated at the next council in April? Is that still, and does somebody need to propose that, or is that taken as read at this point?
I think when we've got to the point where we're all agreeing what we're proposing, we probably do need somebody to propose, and I'll probably get it proposed from the chair without telling him what to do. Get somebody to second it, and you'll know what you're voting on. But I just want to make sure we're clear on what we're all agreeing before we take it forward.
Yeah, okay. So if I do that proposals for item 10, that will go to council in April to debate, but we'll cover that once we've agreed that.
We've got the amendments to B, drop C, D and E.
So the proposals are: we keep A, we amend B, which I'll get Mr. Perks to read out because I'm might not be able to read his writing properly, but that's my fault, not his. So if you do that for B.
The revised recommendation B that the Chair is proposing will read that the recommendations from the Competition and Markets Authority relating to private management companies and adoption of infrastructure be implemented.
Has that anybody happened to second that? Councillor Littleward? All those in favour? So then items 10 will contain A, the amended B and paragraph F. So we'll just have A, B, C then. And that will go to council in April to be discussed.
Yes, those will be debated in April council.
And items 1 to 9 will be going to Cabinet on Monday.
What's the date of it? It's not it's not this forthcoming Monday, is it? Thank you.
20th.
For clarity, with the recommendations 1 to 9, on the 20th that will go to Cabinet, who will request a report, and they will report their findings back to the next available meeting of Council, which will be in July. So items 1 to 9 will be debated following an informed report that Cabinet will have considered between now and July at the July meeting. Item 10, as amended, will be debated on the Council meeting on the 20th of April, so that we can get a letter off to the Secretary of State in line with the timetable for the amendments.
And I would just like to put on record my thanks to Councillor Johnson for chairing that task and finish group, which was almost like herding cats. And there's no truth in the rumour that he had jet black hair before he started chairing that. So thank you, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I would also like to thank the members of the Task and Finish group and the great number of members of the public who responded to our consultation, and to the officers who were concerned in organising and advising us on the group.
Thank you for that. Item number 9, minutes from the Climate Change Panel, pages 19 to 22. We'll note in those minutes. Any comments, or can we take that as noted? Thank you. Fine. Yeah, happy with that, are we, members? Yes, Councillor Wall-Huggins, please. Yeah.
It's only that, obviously, we do at least get a report, but there's never any money or any costings or any money spent associated with these reports in front of us. And there must be money being spent on these matters. And I wonder if we could ask for that extra bit of detail moving forward, please. What does she mean?
I think Mr. Nash wasn't sure of where we were going on that one, so
it may help, Councillor Wally-Hoggins. If one of the reports that we're going to look at under the Cabinet review is the outturn report for the Climate Change and Nature Recovery Progress Report for 26-27, which does include some figures in there about the grants that are being granted. I'm sorry.
There are not many figures in that report, hence my question today. In fact, I would have used the word scant.
Okay, very well. If there are other figures that the committee would require, we can obviously provide them. Yes, that's fine.
A lot more figures.
yeah, I think perhaps the feedback is if there are any items discussed on the climate change panel that have any financial implications, could they be noted? Item number 10, pages 23 to 28, the minutes of the Housing Delivery Advisory Group. Again, if we note those, if any members have any points on those? No, we'll note those. Are we okay to catch the rice, please? Good man, thank you.
I shall fill the void for you, Chair. Yeah, my question actually relates to page 24, I assume item 17, because about the Developers Forum meeting, and I just wondered if any comments can be made about the result of that.
Mr. Nelson, will you be able to assist us on that one, please?
Well, I will confess I was at the said Developers Forum meeting, which was pretty well attended. I think if memory serves, and I've got no details of the record of who attended with me now, but memory serves for about 20 of the largest house builders and land promoters active in the district who turned up. We had a pretty full discussion around there, and actually particularly we addressed the action plan and what we were looking at the industry to do. I think I'd describe the industry reaction to it as relatively positive, understanding, and actually was a willingness to engage with us and see if they could provide the information that we were looking for to offer assurance that they weren't land banking, they were moving forward to deliver rapidly. And they actually, they quite welcomed what the council was trying to do in terms of its response to the issues that it's got with land supply, recognising the political sensitivity of it, resourcing it, and yeah, they expressed a willingness to work with us on that, and we're going to arrange further developers forum meetings later in the year. Does that help answer your question?
Councillor Rice, I've seen you nodded, so happy with that. Any other questions on that item before we move on to item 11, the Cabinet meeting, 13th of April, 2026? Happy to move on? Yeah. Can I just start? I'll just start briefly on this one. I didn't receive a copy of my papers for the Cabinet. I've not got one. So I've looked at some online, and I've been given a version at 10 o'clock this morning. So probably not as prepared as I should, because some of these massive reports are difficult to review online. I don't know whether other members have had that issue with getting their papers for the Cabinet. You've not got yours, Councillor Rice?
No, I have.
Yeah.
No issues this time.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah. So I think, and obviously, we'll go through the points, and whether committee indulges me on this one, whether if members, because it was a big agenda, if members do think of some additional questions or points to raise, for me to raise at Cabinet on Monday, after this meeting, I'm prepared to take them forward on Monday next week. So it's just because we've had a short amount of time on this. I've had very little time on this one, apart from looking online at the report. So whether members go away and think, oh, I should have asked that question, or I've had the opportunity now to reread the papers. Bearing in mind we've had Good Friday and Bank Holiday Easter Monday in between as well. So are members happy with that? Thank you. Councillor Wally-Hogan, sorry about that. Just need to get that point out. Yes, we will be going on. First item on the agenda we'll be looking at is the core strategy review assessment, which is item, I think it's on page 11 of the report. I think this comes to you, Mr. Nelson. Would you like just to give us a brief overview, and then we'll be some of the members will have some questions for you. Oh, and yes, shortly we will be after the question we'll be going for the agreement.
Okay, so a very, very quick overview, as I assume many members are aware. Under planning legislation, effectively the council is required to review its adopted local plan policies for effectively whether they remain current every 5 years. Obviously the core strategy was originally adopted in 2016, so in 2021 the council did a very comprehensive exercise to conclude that the core strategy remained up to date. It was undoubtedly the case then. Now we're in a position where 5 years on we need to repeat that exercise if we are still going to be able to afford full weight to all of those policies. But obviously time has moved on. The South Warwickshire local plan is quite advanced in terms of its production, and the purposes of doing the assessment in quite the same way that was done in 2021 are rather negated, because half of that exercise was to look through what the content of your emerging local plan should be if indeed you review it. So that's sort of, but the South Warwickshire local plan work is obviously now well underway. What we simply did, it was quite a limited exercise this time to look at all the adopted policies in the plan and work out quite as simply as we could whether they remained up to date in accordance with government guidance, which concluded there that the vast majority of the policies numerically do remain up to date, because the thrust of government guidance has not changed that much in terms of protecting important landscapes, respecting heritage, but there are a number of policy areas noticeably around the supply of housing, where in the light of the Borden Hill appeal decision, which you're all familiar with, there's no way we're ever going to be able to maintain that position. So that's what the conclusions of the exercise is. It now needs to go through the formal decision-making process within 5 years of when it happened last time, hence the reason for the exceptional meeting next Monday to reach those conclusions, to allow us to carry on attaching as much weight as we can to as many of the policies as we can.
Before we bring in some questions for you, Mr Nelson, I just need to ask members, we're coming up to the 3 hours of the committee. Doesn't time fly when you're having fun? Our members agreed, you don't have to smile, our members agreed that they're prepared to carry on past the 3-hour mark. All those in favour? I think that's carried. Thank you. Just going to say more time for questions. Who wants to open on this one? Councillor Rice, well done, you're doing well, thank you.
I'm curious to know, and I'm pretty confident what your answer will be, Mr Nelson, but to what extent would developers be, do you think, in a position to challenge some of your estimates as to whether the core strategy is up to date or not? Are there areas that are, without perhaps specifying them, the areas that are perhaps a little more contentious than you've just given us the impression of?
Undoubtedly so. I mean, we know that from some of the correspondence that we've had with industry, because part of this has effectively been subject to consultation, which we did on the emerging interim policy position statement. So we've seen some industry response. I'm under no illusion, don't want to give anybody any illusion that there will be unanimous agreement with the view that the officers have taken about whether those plans, whether the policies all remain up to date, and there will be scope for the industry to challenge where that's relevant in terms of planning applications and particularly through appeals. What I would say, though, in response to that is the rather obvious question is that if we don't do this exercise, everything automatically becomes out of date. So you're in a far better position having done the exercise than not, even if subject to that level of detailed examination and scrutiny, some may get overturned at some point in future.
Councillor Wally-Hoggins, please.
I need to go back to the previous agenda item on our OSC to do with this. So we had the working group dealing with housing supply numbers and the Housing Delivery Advisory Group. So we've got here, I think I've got this right, that this is an appendix and the deliverable housing supply as of the 31st of March 2025. Is that why have we got this in front of us?
That's an appendix to a different item on Cabinet.
Nevertheless, when I look at that, these are all interfacing with one another because, truthfully, the document that we've got before us that you've talked about today with the core strategy, I always hated doing this essay writing. When you look at perhaps the weaker points that you've already outlined to us, policies that are considered to be only partially up to date, CS10 and CS21 to do with the housing land supply, it then really brings into sharp focus, I hope I'm being articulate enough, as to why this advisory group that we've got here, why their notes need to be a little bit more detailed, because what I really want to know and what I really want to be able to report to my residents is how many more planning permissions have we given, how much nearer are we to achieving that the housing numbers, because without it I assume that everything can go to appeal, really. am I speaking? I don't,
No.
they all seem very interconnected.
I think they're interconnected, and I was probably going to raise a similar question when we talk about progress on report on options for boosting the supply of housing. What do you think, Mr. Niles? Do you think that would probably be better answered there, or?
The point I'm trying to make here, Councillor Crump, is that we are now going to clearly go beyond 3 hours, and so many of these items seem to me to be interlinked. And perhaps one of the reasons that we are in the situation we need a little bit more joined up thinking. This isn't a criticism. We're all completely swamped in our parishes about the development that's going on, but we do need some reassurances here.
Yeah,
all right, I'll be quiet, but I'm concerned. I'm really concerned.
No, we're not quite. I'm definitely trying not to shut you up or quieten you down, Councillor Wally Hogan, and I do apologise if it's come across like totally opposite. I think it's a pertinent question, but I think it's probably better when we talk about the 5-year housing land, boosting the 5-year housing land supply.
Would it be helpful to move the agenda around and do that item now? Because I'm sure Sunita won't mind waiting on the housing. We could do them together, and we could do all the planning issues with Craig.
Yeah, I think we've had a suggestion. We do the planning. We'll do with the planning ones. So if we do the core strategy and the progress on the options for boosting the supply of housing, if you do those together. Councillor Keithy, do you want to come in, please?
Well, only to say, yeah, that's fine if you want to change the order of these. But I mean, all we needed to do was to note the fact that the Housing Delivery Advisory Group had their meeting and the minutes were produced. And in the Cabinet details, we've got a report that they're looking at, the report that's going to Cabinet on the options for boosting supply, which is all the detail.
Yep, I think I sort of, agree with you on this one. So, if there's some points about was it CS10 and CS21 you mentioned, Councillor Wally Huggins, about being those out of date and the implications for South Warwickshire local.
It's not that. The policy, if you go to page 13 and the evidence base, appendix 1 there, it tells you that considered the policies that are up to date are CS1, etc., ending on CS27. Policies that are considered to be out of date is the next paragraph down, although it should be noted that these include key policies concerning housing land supply. So that's what I'm trying to say, that there's so much of this is interlinked with that housing. And the point that I'm trying to make here is we've already had about the developers and open land. So much this is interlinked with those housing numbers, and that's really that's our fundamental point here, is that's going to be what's going to be going to appeal, isn't it? So we get it's just yes, quite.
Mr. Nelson, do you want to come?
Can I just comment? I don't dispute in the slightest that all of this is interlinked, and to a certain extent, I think the order of dealing with this sensibly is get the discussion of the core strategy policies, if you're out of the way early, because I think in terms of the council's position, that's, we've gone through an exercise and effectively we've reached certain conclusions. I think the conclusions about the policies that are deemed to be out of date or only partially out of date, it weakens the council's position. I don't like reaching those conclusions because it undermines the primacy of the local plan to a certain extent. But the evidence where we are with 2.7, where we were at with 2.7 years land supply, now at 2.2, as you will have seen from the other papers, means that I can do many things, but I can't argue that we have an adequate land supply and our housing land supply policies in the core strategy are up to date. I just can't make that argument. I would lose. So we have to deal and regard those policies as being out of date as part of, that's just how the government design system works. But the point I tried to make in terms of the introduction is this is I think I would describe it as something of an exercise in damage limitation here. So it's seeking to minimise that, to maximise the control the council still retains over the development that is coming forward. But it is part of a bigger process. But I think in terms of your dealing with it today, dealing separately about whether there's any questions about the judgment of which policies are out of or up to date is probably best dealt with separately before we move on to the more complex and detailed bits about what we're doing to recover the situation.
I'll bring Mr Perkins in, and then I'll bring Councillor Catcher.
So to answer Councillor Keithley's question about what are you scrutinising, I think probably the committee's time would be best used if there are any policies that we've deemed are out of date that you feel that is incorrect, or vice versa, there are anything we think are still valid that you think is correct, whatever the right way of saying that is. That's probably what you're scrutinising. Are you happy with the list which is set out in, well, probably most clearly in 3.1?
Councillor Catcher, please, then Councillor Littlelord.
I think, Chair, thank you very much. There are three issues here that are all interlinked. There's no doubt about that. One is clearly we have an existing core strategy, which is our existing plan, which we are determining applications in relation to, but some of it is out of date. And I congratulate Graham, who actually, I think, on a very busy weekend spent going right the way through this to make sure that we've actually filleted out from it those elements of the core strategy which we need to retain, we need to approve and keep in place to maximise our defence. But clearly we know that we have not got a 5-year housing land supply, so therefore policies in the core strategy relating to land supply are out of date and therefore probably indefensible, which is why coming on to the second issue, we have a working party working hard on how do we repair that 5-year housing land supply, and that paper is obviously under item 11. Work is ongoing with that. It is really quite difficult. We are going to have to grant consent probably for another 3,000 houses. And there needs to be a relation to a proposal in relation to how we do that, and that is what officers are working on at the moment. To date, we have not really closed that gap at all, but we are considering proposals for anything up to 10,000 houses at the moment, so it is a very, very substantive item that's going on. And then the third element to this is clearly where we go for the future with the South Warwickshire local plan, which we're also working very hard on, and hopefully having that draft plan available for us to be able to use from probably May onwards this year. As I'm not a planning lawyer, but it's all about the tilted balance of probability. At the moment, the tilt in relation to the core strategy is damaged because obviously some of it is out of date, but we want to make sure that this council still supports those elements of the core strategy, which is defendable, and that's the basis of Graham's report here now. Looking to the future, clearly the new South Warwickshire local plan will be where we'll be tilting towards in the future. But in the interim, we're being pragmatic in terms of how can we possibly close our 5-year housing land supply, which is a very difficult juggling act which we're about. So those are the three elements that we're dealing with.
Mr Littlelord, please.
Thank you, Mr Crump.
I
thought you said Mr, sorry.
Well, whatever. I'm not. I'll take most titles.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I want to thank Mr Nelson for what is a concise and clear report. The most important part for me is Appendix 1, which I find extremely helpful, clear, and I'm sure that Councillor Keithley will agree this will be very, very, very helpful in the clarifying what is in date and what is not in date. And there's been a lot of confusion, I think, over that. So I'm very happy to see this report. I found it very useful myself already. the real issue here is whether or not we have a 5-year housing land supply, and the problem there is that is not in the gift of this council to achieve. It is so much down to the developers to agree the build-out rate, and at the moment we're in a position, as far as I can see, where we're helpless to achieve that aim of 5 years easily as a council itself. The most important part of this, and I urge that we move on, is to look at the mitigation that's available to the council to try and improve that situation as much as possible. And so I propose that we move on from looking at the individual core strategy points, because at the end of the day we may have, as Councillor Coucher has said, we're looking at a new South Warwickshire local plan, but if we don't have a 5-year housing land supply, that will be out of date before it starts as well, it seems to me. So the critical thing is to get the 5-year housing land supply in position.
Thank you. Councillor Keith.
Oh, just to say I'd agree with that. I'm happy with what the report that Mr Nelson's prepared in respect to those policies that are now out of date. And we should, I've got no comments on it at all. We should accept that report and move on, as you said.
Yeah, also I've just got a couple. One to note that the financial implications are in paragraph 5.2. It's been taken into account. And just something for my information, regarding the out-to-date ones or the partially up-to-date ones, have you got a programme which ones you're going to tackle first, where you're going to put the resources, or is it not quite as easy as that, Mr Howson?
Unfortunately, as you probably suspect, it's not quite as easy as that, because you can't instantly review individual policies. The way that those issues will get resolved is through the forthcoming South Warwickshire local plan.
But you've made a note of where you've done your assessment. It's going to go to full council on the 20th as part of the 5-year review. So you are aware of where there are potential issues, and we'll leave it at that. I think Lee said so in his minute. I can see from your nodding that you're in agreement with that. So I think we've talked about that. I think that's quite important. Any other comments, members? Again, I'm sure Mr Allison will give me a comprehensive update for Monday when I speak to Cabinet on your behalf. So we'll now go on to, we'll talk about the, yeah, we'll do the progress on reports for boosting the supply of housing land. So we do those two together, and that is on page 275 of the Cabinet report. And again, apologies for this on side. This is, apart from seeing it online, this is the first time I've seen the paper copy, and as you can see, it's not exactly a small paper to go through. So again, bear with me if there's any questions that are in there and I haven't picked them up. So, Mr. Nelson, do you want to come in on again, please?
Well, would you like me to give you a quick overview?
It would be good, thank you.
Okay, because members will recall that on the 6th of October last year in this room, Cabinet endorsed effectively, following the loss of the District Council's 5-year land supply, that we undertook an action plan and it agreed to set up a member advisory group to steer that process. There was 15 original points in the action plan, and we committed then to report back progress through to Cabinet 6 months after, and this is that project report. As I think people recognise, what we've tried to do, I mean, the report itself, even though there's quite a bit of information attached to it, only runs to sort of 5 pages to try and keep it relatively digestible. You can summarise it as saying that in addition to all the governance and bringing in the resources to help manage this process, we produced the interim policy statement, which we had hoped to attach for final approval, but because we actually got a pretty good level of response to the consultation, we just haven't managed to do all the mechanics of that, but we're expecting to take that forward through to through to June Cabinet, with the extension that that will not only provide the clarity about which of our local plan policies are up to date, but will also provide that said clarity over where neighbourhood plans all sit under the new arrangements, and provide more positive information, particularly around how we're managing that issue of deliverability and how we're working with developers to evidence the actual level of deliverability, so to increase the likelihood of every consent that we issue counting towards the 5-year land supply, because that's one of the issues that we do have, and one of the reasons why we lost our land supply wasn't necessarily a lack of consents that were out there, it was a lack of consents that meet the government definition of what amounts to being deliverable within that 5-year period. We've also updating you on where we're getting to in terms of bringing forward sites, and originally we had looked at additional sites that the council had already identified through emerging site allocations plans, through neighbourhood plans, etc., and through brownfield work. I think the focus in the intervening time has probably been less on bringing forward new sites rather than managing the sites that are being brought forward, because it's become pretty apparent that actually there's a large pipeline out there of not only formal applications that are in, which there's a summary of attached to the papers, but also almost as much, again, we are aware of is being worked on. Now, that's one of the reasons why the meetings of HDAG are held in private, effectively, because we're privy to information that isn't yet in the public domain. It all will head into the public domain, assuming applications are forthcoming on the sites. But when that information is released is not ours to release, hence why we have to treat those in private. But there is this large pipeline of sites coming forward, which, as I say, is over 5,000 homes just on the sites that I've appended to the plan. But as Councillor Coucher has said, that's part of a wider pipeline that is almost going to be double that size. That's what we're aware of coming forward across the district, and clearly that's giving rise to considerable concerns in many of our communities who are particularly affected by that. And that's where the third set of measures about development management is how we're looking to coordinate those activities in terms of mapping all these things, engaging with the statutory consultees, and particularly doing things like signing up to that government pilot scheme around particularly the use of AI in terms of speeding up the process of negotiating Section 106 agreements. So we've signed up to that pilot scheme, and we're making other arrangements to how we engage with statutory consultees and how our own processes work, so that where we can speed up the process for two reasons. And I think we're not entirely masters of our own destiny. We're trying to influence and work with people. We're not controlling this. So, as Councillor Littlewood pointed out, we don't actually build the homes, so to some extent we are beholden to the development industry about their funding and their ability to deliver. They do need planning consent if they are going to deliver. And the other point is we don't hold all the technical details to allow us to judge the acceptability of planning proposals that come forward. So we are beholden to particularly the county council, but also statutory consultees. And the initial discussions we've had, it's the start of a process, have been pretty positive about them working with us to assist and increase their resources and speed up the planning process, because ultimately that's the only way we're going to get back into control of this and limit the risk to the South Warwickshire local plan, is by increasing that land supply that we've got and doing it as a matter of some urgency. We also update on where we are on supply assumptions. As you will know, if you've read the papers, the position in terms of our deliverable land supply has worsened. We knew that was going to happen. We said as much in the October the 6th report. It will take time to drive it forward. We hope we're at the nadir, I think is the technical term, isn't it, for the bottom of that cycle. And we hope we're going to be significantly improving things from this point forward, although we'll publish a further update in the summer based on where we are now. That might not be hugely different from where we are at the moment, but the objectives that the member group have set to us are looking at delivering substantial improvements the following year. So it's eating an elephant. You've got to start where you are, you've got to drive it through, and you're going to have to make, through the planning committee is going to have to make some pretty significant decisions over the rest of the year. And the final comment, the things that we deal with, is just there's a lot of moving parts here, and we're bringing in experienced external project managers to assist with that, and we have effectively now completed the process of backfilling the resource that I had previously provided earlier in the year before my role changed, and that new team member should start with us on Monday next week. So it's a work in progress. We knew on the 6th of October we were never going to have it provided cracked in 6 months, but I hope in terms of this monitoring report, it gives you a flavour of the work that we have been doing that's effectively the start of a longer term process.
Thank you, Mr Nelson. I'll start with Councillor Keithy, then Councillor
Thanks, Graham. Is there, for members' benefit and anybody watching, is there a quick and easy answer in a few words to the concept of deliverability? We've had a furniture incident on my left. We just let the wardrobe and furniture failure. There we go. Back to normal. Services resumed. Graham, yeah, quick and easy answer. Deliverability. Is it spade in the ground? Is it because they implement permissions they can do quickly, they can hang around for ages thrashing out the details of a 106, and you've just mentioned 5 years. Is it building it out in 5 years? What's the quick and easy answer for people to understand this deliverability issue?
There is a definition, the precise definition eludes me, but it involves, no, it doesn't have to be spade in the ground. You can include sites as deliverable even though there is no activity going on the site, but you have to be able to demonstrate that it is capable of being delivered within that time frame. And there are certain things that the government have specified. So for instance, a site needs to be available now. So if it is in an alternate use at the moment, so if someone's occupying the land on a short-term lease, doesn't meet that criteria, and it flips. If it's a full permission, then the assumption is that would normally be deliverable unless there is evidence to the contrary, and if it's an outline permission, the position reverses, and it is assumed normally to be undeliverable unless you can counter that.
That's quite interesting because officers have been advising that PIPs are deliverable, and we're getting a lot of planning in principle applications, and of course they've got to go through a second phase of technical design stage. So I'm surprised by what you say about outlines, because there's more certainty with an outline than there is with a planning in principle application.
Yeah, the other thing that I should make clear is there's also a difference depending on the scale of the proposal. So sites under 10, which most of your, if not all of your PIPs apply to, are easier to count within the supply pipeline as deliverable than sites over 10. And clearly the focus of the work we've been doing through for the Housing Delivery Advisory Group is pretty much on those larger sites. So
Chair, it might be handy if Graham might be able to provide a bit of more detailed explanation, because all members are coming across these applications in their wards.
I'll tell you what, Councillor Keithy, you're obviously looking at my handwriting here, because one I mentioned...
You know, I can read upside down at a distance.
And hieroglyphics as well, because I was going to raise the point about PIP, which is helpful, and also about more clarification regarding the sites as well. And the under 10 sites you've just mentioned, that's been really helpful. And again, if you could, some clarification for both members on the planning committee and also members who are having planning applications, I think that would be really helpful. So I think that's
Thank you, Chair.
Right, Councillor Wally-Hoggins, please. Be careful with your chair, though, and you, Councillor Keefer.
Thank you. Are you able to indicate, I'm heartened to hear that you're boosting the worker bees working on this, but can you indicate, please, is the new team member that is backfilling, is that an external appointment or is that an internal appointment, please?
That's an external appointment.
Thank you.
Councillor Keith, is there any chance you could just do that outside, please? Yeah. Yes. Councillor Littlewood, Councillor Wally-Hoggins, so you were being interrupted and I couldn't hear your question properly. So apologies for interrupting about the interruption. So if you want to ask the question again, and I do apologise.
No, I've got the answer to the question, but the follow-on question was the document here is really useful, and we'll be getting an update because hopefully there'll be more sites added to this, will there? How often are we proposing to give councillors an update so that we're seeing the progress? Because some of these are not outline pending, appeals pending, etc.
Yeah, I was going to take a steer from Cabinet at your meeting, but in the recommendation to Cabinet, we suggest that we replicate this thing every 6 months now and do it again in October. And clearly, if there's further requirement for briefing of members to assist, because I do appreciate the pressures that you'll be under from your local communities who are very concerned by this, I am more than happy to pull together briefing notes on technical issues around definitions of deliverability and how it works, or indeed provide other briefing material, frankly, that you'd find useful. Clearly that's a live spreadsheet that you're looking at. It's probably actually marginally out of date now because it was produced a couple of weeks ago. It changes quite rapidly. What is in the public domain, which you have there, we can update as and when. You'll find it useful.
So
I think it's important because this could be alarming for some residents in some parishes and towns. I think it's important to have the caveat for public watching that these proposals here are merely that, and that these the granting of permissions is not necessarily the same. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. These are pending applications all in the process, which we can't hear nor anybody else can make a decision about whether they are acceptable or not until you've done all the consultation, you've got to the end of the process. The difficult situation the council is in is we have to now apply that tilted balance so that things that may have 2 years ago clearly been fairly straightforwardly ruled as unacceptable, that may not necessarily be the outcome. That's the process that we're managing.
Councillor Littlewood, you're next, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question on clarification, if that's okay, Mr. Nelson. I'm looking at page 310 of the Cabinet Papers, which would be page 6 of your report, and it's with regard to small windfall completions. The table runs from 2018 to the end of 2025, and it shows an average of 173 windfall completions on average through those years. So taking, as you say, 95% of that, that's 165. So that is a repetitive average annually, but you only take that into account in years 4 and 5. when you're looking at the five-year housing land supply. And the consequence of that is that we're now at 2.21. If you were to add that in every year, that would be 2.63, which is not that much different from where we are now. So I just wanted to clarify the logic of only applying it in the latter 2 years of the 5-year period.
Okay. The logic is that the vast majority of windfall housing that will be built over the next 3 years already has planning consent, so is already captured in land supply in another part of another table. That these are predominantly, well, these are all smaller sites with planning consent, so they're already counted elsewhere. We can only count that this is going to be the future which hasn't currently got consent. And typically on smaller sites, that it's 2 to 3 years before sites are built from coming in for planning, which why we have to justify that lag, and we can't put in 5 years windfall supply because we would be double counting over conditions, over permissions we have already counted. Sorry if that's a slightly confusing answer to a...
It was a good try, Councillor Littlewood. Councillor Coucher.
No, it wasn't a try. I was trying to understand it.
I really wanted to answer one of the points which Councillor Wally-Hoggins actually raised. Unfortunately, she's not here. I think we obviously have got a very long list of individual sites here, which, of course, as professional planners, they will be going through whether they are developable or deliverable within the remit that all authorities have. What I'm very concerned about, and it's certainly relevant to my community in Wellesbourne, as it is in Shipston, as it is in Southam, most of the towns, that we are ringed by a series of potential developments, and it's very important that we're looking at things in aggregation and we're not just looking at individual sites and picking them off like that. And I'm very, very keen that what Graham is presenting, when we do come to perhaps recommending certain things for development, it's seen in the context of the other developments in those areas. So I think it's to give assurance that that is being considered as part of this process.
So I think you're not the first one to say that about certain towns being ringed, and there's all sorts of knowledge. Councillor Keithy, then I'll come in.
Well, just quickly in response to that, and Graham will probably comment on this. The problem is that 5-year housing land supply is a district-wide problem rather than an area problem, isn't it?
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. I've got one or two questions to bring in. I'll just bring them in individually. I know, because I didn't have my cabinet papers, I looked at the Anorak in me and the pedant, or whatever phrase, looked at the 6th of October meeting and the subsequent minutes of that, and I noticed this report was due back in March 26. Not a real issue, because I think you've committed to bringing a report every 6 months or so, and if that, I think that commitment is fair and reasonable, and we won't be pedantic over a little fallen timescale. So I think that agreement is positive. Obviously, we know the change from 2.74 to 2.21, and in the previous report, we were looking around about 3,500 to 4,000 homes to meet the government's direction of travel, shall we say? Is that still? I know you can't be precise, but is that number still relevant?
Yes, that is. I think I said as much in this report. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it's paragraph 3.63.
I thought I'd put in something in it that said.
Yeah, and so I know it's in 3.63, but I just haven't really had a chance to look at it in detail.
That estimate we gave back in October about the size of the eventual gap that you will need to fill in order to reclaim the 5-year land supply. There's nothing in the monitoring report now that would suggest that was wrong, particularly. So,
yeah,
we'll
okay,
keep
it was just confirmation of that.
Advisement.
3.72. The objective of the project is to maximise the likelihood of SDC by summer 27 being able to demonstrate, etc. I needn't read that out for you. Are we still on track with that? I know we're only 6 months down the road. How much certainty is there behind that statement?
And frankly, there isn't a huge amount of uncertainty. I mean, we had that discussion in full at the Housing Delivery Advisory Group. As some of the earlier discussions noted, we're not masters of our own destiny here, and depending on how the economy goes nationally and how house building rates work and the attitude to investment in certain sites, we can't necessarily guarantee that we'll do that. But the discussion went that that even though it's a challenging target, if you don't achieve that target in full, you'll be in a lot better position, particularly in terms of demonstrating the soundness of your emerging South Warwickshire local plan, if you have got somewhere to achieve it, rather than going in effectively taking the contrary approach, putting your head in the sands, not engaging as positively through the development management process, and seeing your 2.2 years that you're at now further deteriorate. It will get worse if you choose that option, but through setting out this course of action, we're trying to manage it. As I say, I think it's a very reasonable and realistic target to have substantially increased your land supply from the current 2.2 years. Whether we'll be able to drive it quite as far as that 5-year magic number within that year's time frame, frankly, I don't know. I can give no assurance. All I can do is give you an assurance that you're a damn sight better trying to do it than not doing it, even if you don't actually achieve the full extent of the target.
So you're basically demonstrating that you're taking significant and difficult decisions. I've used that phrase, I heard that phrase before at meetings around 5-year housing and land supply, to try and rectify the issues, and you're demonstrating your best efforts as a council to try and regain control of the 5-year housing and land supply. And by doing that, you'll be able to, there'll be more confidence in the way we're going forward. Am I right in saying that?
The phrase I've sometimes heard the inspectors use when they've been debating this thing at various forms of examination is, I hear you and I'm satisfied that you're straining every sinew to deliver in accordance with the requirements. That's what we're both trying to do and trying to project.
Members are okay if I carry on with some questions? Good. Yeah, no problem. I noticed, obviously, we've had additional resources to cope with the additional workload, significant additional workload. I'll stress that so members will pick up this thing. And I know some of the applications are reliant on statutory consultees. And in one of my previous roles, I was portfolio holder for the local lead flooding authority. I'll get it right sometime. And they pride themselves on responding to 99% plus, but obviously with significant change in numbers. How are we helping or trying to facilitate speedy responses from our partners?
Well, we're having quite an active discussion with the statutory consultees around that. We've already met with the county council, and actually we've had it's the start of a process working with them, because part of the process involves the budget amendment that was made here. So we do realise that it isn't necessarily through want of trying, and if we are going to get speedier responses, we may need to assist with their costs of providing it. Those debates haven't been completed, but we've started them and have had positive engagement from the County Council to date about taking them forward. But so it's an action that we remain committed to driving forward, but haven't completed as yet.
I'd be pleased to know I've only got one more. It's a general one though, and it just link in with the core strategy that we were talking earlier. Yeah, really, what's from a layman's or layperson's, layperson's point of view, what are the implications of this 5-year housing and land supply deficit and the proposals to rectify this on the South Warwickshire local plan? I often get asked that question when I go to meetings. Just try and be as brief as possible and put it in words that are easy for councillors to use in other meetings if possible.
Look, the situation that we're trying to manage is one you'd be in, irrespective of whether the South Warwickshire local plan was produced or not. So take the South Warwickshire local plan out of the equation and you still have an issue that you deal with, that your current local plan is out of date. Ultimately, getting the South Warwickshire local plan over the line is the way that you will ensure that you're not in this situation again for the foreseeable and have got it. But through managing this situation, we can actually assist to get the South Warwickshire local plan over the line, because one of the things that it will need to satisfy the inspector of to get through its examination is that we will be able to demonstrate, the councils collectively will be able to demonstrate a 5-year supply on the point of the plan's adoption. If you're starting that at below 2 years, that's an uphill challenge. If you're at 4 or 5 years, that's a much easier test to be passed.
Thank you. That was just what I was looking for. Thank you. Any other questions on this? Right then. Thank you very much. We'll two other items of the Cabinet meeting, which is the approval of the housing allocation scheme, which is...
I'll introduce you and Sneech.
Yeah, just come back, yeah. I'll just hold it. Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. Right, next item is the approval of the housing allocation scheme. So I'll let Mr Perks kick off on this one, please.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully this is a document that we're sort of quite familiar with now, because it's not its first airing at the committee. We started off sort of sharing this with members at the formative stage. It's sort of our housing allocation scheme. We did some workshops with members to sort of help inform the draft that we produced, which came through this committee and went out for consultation earlier in the year. We've now had the consultation responses back and have attended to those, and what we're presenting you today, and this will go on to sort of Cabinet and Council, is the final document for your consideration and approval, and the final document set out in Appendix 1. That's about the extent of my knowledge, but I have Sunita with me and Councillor Coles, who are far closer to this than I am, who will be able to answer your detailed questions.
Thank you for attending, and sorry the meeting's dragged on a bit, but we've had a large agenda. Sunita, would you, obviously as Housing Communities Manager, that's your proper title, hopefully, could you just give us a brief overview? I know we are quite familiar on this. Any changes since it's come last time? What are the key features and what are the key wins with this new scheme, please?
Right, yes, no problem. So we've completed our consultation exercise, and the feedback was very positive. Between 80 to 95% of respondents said they were in support of the changes. I think what was quite positive about it was that people recognised that what we were focusing on was housing need, and also taking into consideration things like people that are experiencing domestic abuse, also takes into account armed forces, the Armed Forces Covenant, to make sure priority is given to certain groups. And basically it's a more simple a scheme. It's got 5 bands. It recognises those in high housing need, very high housing need, and it also has a reduced preference band where people might have a reduced preference because they might have rent arrears or have a disqualification criteria. So overall, in terms of a scheme, the feedback has been really positive, and we feel like it's a fair and a legally compliant scheme.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Any questions before I start? Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. One statement, and again, I think it's appropriate. Yeah, domestic abuse, armed forces, the things you mentioned are taken into account, because I think that's what our residents know, come to expect, and I think it's laudable that you're taking those into account. On the consultation 1.2.2, 253 responses via the questionnaire and 4 via email. Was that in line with expectations, slightly less or slightly more?
I think we thought that was quite a positive a response in terms of feedback. We've got about 2,500 applicants on the register currently, and this was a combination of stakeholders, applicants, residents. So I think overall it was a reasonable response.
And again, any lessons learned going into the future? Anything you'll probably do differently?
Yeah, I think the key thing was we've not made any major changes to it because of the feedback we've had, but we did tighten up some of the wording and the language to make it a bit clearer. There was a few questions around Section 106s and understanding that, so we've committed to make sure there's clarity around that. There was a point around the income, the rent arrears threshold being a little low at £500, and so we've amended that slightly to sort of recognise managed and unmanaged debt. So if it's between £500 and £1,000, but it's managed, we will still consider them to be to go on the register.
I think that's quite important that we do review again in terminology. And I was looking at South Warwickshire Local Plan website, and one of their consultation responses was there's a bit of jargon or some of the terminology, and sometimes obviously we are so close to these things that you don't realise you're doing it. And I'm not going to hold my hand up and say I've done exactly the same. So I think it is good, and I think whether our communication teams can help when you do these things as well. Again, high support, 80 to 95% agreeing with the proposed changes. So I think that is really positive. So again, we've looked on this, and I think we had to do this. My only other question would be, how often will the scheme like to be reviewed in the future? Because we haven't. It seemed to be a little while since we did it. So just plans on that, please.
So at present, and as it states in the report, we will be reviewing it in 12 months to make sure the scheme does what we want it to do. So it will be reviewed in 12 months' time.
Sorry, I didn't get the papers till I've only got them this morning when I walked in. My copy hadn't come, and I couldn't quite see that online. So apologies for the slightly stupid question, but it's good that it's come out in the public. Any other questions for the portfolio holder or the officer? No, I think you've gone away. And thank you. Those are our thanks, and it's good we've got a relatively reasonable response on this, and relatively high approval rate. And it's good that we've got a commitment to, one, learn from the process, any improvements if we do it again, and to look at it within 12 months. I think that's most of the things scrutiny we would expect. Thank you for that.
Oh, not for here.
I'd disappear if I were you. Do you want one comment then, Councillor Cole?
Councillor Keithley has given me a question, but we haven't got the answer. So, shall we give you...
I could just give you a little...
Yeah? Okay.
Question out, and then just in case there's thousands watching on the webcam.
Okay, so my question relates to KPIs, to support section 6 and also page 24. So essentially, and it mentions the number of new percentage of Home Choice Plus applicants and actioned. So essentially, our response to this is we're clear that we want a robust performance management system in place as part of the scheme, but we are in the process of implementing a new housing IT system. So our reporting will be considered as part of the implementation plan of this new system.
Brilliant. And we'll put that in the minutes as well, so that'll be very good. And look forward to seeing you present it at Cabinet on Monday, even though I said Friday, so thank you for that. The next item we'll be talking about is a climate change and nature recovery progress report and 26-27 climate change and nature recovery delivery plan. That's a nice, succinct title, isn't it? That is on pages 179 to 210 of the Cabinet papers. So, Councillor Whitehuggins, I know you mentioned when we were talking about the climate change panel meeting minutes. Do you want to come in and raise your point on that one?
The climate change panel minutes, we often talk about the projects and so forth with the money allocated within that climate project. And, you know, we're living in difficult financial times for many people, and I do think it's appropriate that we do have an eye on what is being spent and the difference that it's being made. It's the so what bit. It's just good housekeeping, isn't it, to know what funds are being allocated. Now, I know that with the project in front of us here, the Climate and Nature Project is asking for money from that fund to be allocated to this, which is, you know, I understand that. But again, you know, it's all about the bottom line and money that's being spent, because our taxpayers rightfully want to know what the money is being spent on. I don't think there's anything contentious in what I'm asking for here, but I do have other questions regarding the documents before us.
Yep, thank you. I think the officers will note the point and we'll raise that. I'll raise that on Monday. You can, by the way, you want to come in?
So when we look at page 215, and it looks at the following sites will be eligible for the Wilder Communities projects, I'm a bit perplexed really, because so bearing in mind this is council taxpayers' money, so we've got here playgroup grounds. Has this been added to a list because somebody somewhere in the council knows that there's a playgroup that has its own grounds that could do with a bit of money to help move things on? It just is really specific, because I don't know that many playgroups that are in their own premises with their own grounds. Surely they're usually in village halls, etc., which are already noted here, and community centre grounds, that's already there. And in addition to that, we've then got nursing homes with public access to a business within the grounds. That seems very specific to me, as if somebody's already been given the nod that they might be able to apply for some money, and this will be, because it's in this list, they'll be able to apply for it. Because let's not forget that nursing home fees are very, very high. They're mainly privately owned, and I do feel that those businesses, which is what nursing homes are, there's been numerous articles on it, should in fact be paying for any for anything themselves in their own grounds. It shouldn't be the council that is enhancing those privately owned nursing homes with exorbitant fees attached. Am I speaking in tongues here?
Yeah, and so I think we'll haven't got an officer here now, so I think we'll. No, I think we'll raise the question. We note them in the minutes, is in the minutes that we've raised, and we'll get the answer back from the officers. Because I've got a question regarding the amount of funds and grants that we give out, and I'd just be wondering the amount of officer time it takes to support all these different funds, and you know.
The other matter on this list is churchyards, because that's really contentious when it comes to parish councils about spending on churches, because they have their own funding and they have their own policies regarding climate change and nature recovery and so forth. And again, that's the third thing in that list that you think, what is this to do with? And are we supposed to be doing that as a council for, because I don't think that we are. It's you know, I'm astonished that we don't have an officer here to talk about this, to be honest, because they are paid quite a lot of money.
Yeah, no, I can say I think we can raise these questions. I'll raise these questions on Monday. I think that is.
Can we reinforce the point that when something like this magnitude is before Overview and Scrutiny Committee, that actually they should be present and here, please?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a fair point. So, Councillor Littlewood, please.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going to add to the questions for Monday, because I note that you've got village verges and green spaces, which actually is an incorrect terminology, because verges belong to the highways and villages cannot do anything with the highways. Green spaces are one thing, but what they really need to have on here is village greens, which is the responsibility of the village parish council. So I think they really need to tighten up on the terminology. It's a bit sloppy here, frankly, and it's not meant as it's unusual, I think, for us to be presented with something that hasn't been tidied up quite as much as it should be, I think. So that's the question for Monday, please.
Councillor Wally-Huggins, please.
Yeah, I'll come back and say, I think that this document is premature in going to Cabinet, and I think that we've raised some quite serious issues here, and that perhaps given the amount of stuff going to Cabinet on Monday, that I think this potentially should be revised and brought back to Cabinet later. We've got another Cabinet meeting in 2 weeks' time for the next full council meeting. But this, I could keep going with my questions about this document, but we're all tired, and it's 10 to 2, and there are more questions to be asked about this document than this document satisfies, if that makes sense. So thank you.
Well,
or more than this document reassures.
If the committee is minded to go down that route, we can ask Cabinet to defer the item. Obviously, it's been published because we've got the paperwork now, but we could ask the item to be deferred so we can have scrutinise it properly at the next OSC.
Let me say that we can't scrutinise this document properly because we don't have an officer here in order to answer the questions. So we are unable to, Overview and Scrutiny Committee is unable to scrutinise this, and there is a considerable sums of money involved here. Do you need me to propose that?
Yes, please.
Right, I propose that we ask for the deferment of this document until a future OSC, and so that we can scrutinise this properly with officers present so that we can do that scrutinisation, and until that, because of the amount of money involved in this, do I need to add anything else to that? Is that okay? But I will need a seconder to that.
Got a seconder, Councillor Littlewood. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? 1. So it's carried. OSC recommends that it asks Cabinet to defer the item so an officer can attend OSC. Councillor Johnson.
Just ask what the timetable of this might be, because I wouldn't like to see an unnecessary deferment. And if this could come to the next OSC.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah,
Right, can we give it at the next OSC? Can it be at the top of the list? Because it needs to have the gravitas. With this amount of money being spent on it, it needs to have the gravitas that it deserves it. Thank you.
It would be the highest position on the agenda as possible. I think we've covered all the Cabinet meeting. Next item on the agenda is the work plan, and we've already got an item on the work plan for the next meeting, which is the Climate Change and Nature Recovery Progress Report 26-27 change, etc. So I think we'll note that one. We have also got Development Local Enforcement Plan and the year-end 25-26 year-end performance report. With this addition that we've agreed to put on now, I think I'm reluctant to take any more. So, members happy with that? Right, so item number 13, I've not been notified of any urgent business, so I now close this meeting at 13:56. Thank you.